When you get married, that means you're not supposed to have to vacuum.
That no one
Well,
told her.
You might have to if your wife has to be in the office 8 hours a day.
That's right.
My
wife,
hey,
Dave,
we're retired.
Brian, my wife thought the same thing, and it's been true.
It's 6 o'clock, so we are live.
Right.
Hey, it's right though. 62 years she can do it.
She has experience already, right?
Yeah, we're going to see
Dave.
grandchildren.
Dave, many more happy years.
Thank you. Each one is a blessing.
Right. It's never too much.
But there are days that have the sounds to it.
Mr. Rennett, are you there?
I believe we're just waiting on a couple more board members, Levy and Justin and Heim, possibly.
Do you hear me? This is Ellie.
Yes,
we hear you. Hi, Ellie. How are you?
Good.
Hi.
How bad is my echo time?
No. Right now, it's still good.
Okay.
Ellie, we just have to hold off for one more, this meeting and one more. That's it. July 20, with God's help, we'll be back.
And just so you know, July 20th, my 47th anniversary. So it's nice that I'll have something to, and I'm going to invite my wife to come with me.
I'm gonna be in Orlando, so I mean, you could just abandon ship and leave everyone to flounder with me if you'd like.
We're waiting for the party.
And I'll be in South Africa on a safari tour, so maybe you want to come with me.
Oh, that's better.
That's interesting.
Well, you can do that at Disney.
That at Disney?
Justin's is on, and Mr. Rennett is on. There's one that says user. I don't know if that's Chaim Sable or not. Al, could you unmute the user and find out?
Yeah, we also have a call-in ending in 67. I'm not sure who that is. Do we have a call-in user ending in phone number 67?
Yeah, Chaim Sable.
Hi.
Okay.
And we have a user who logged in with the name user. Is that a board member? No. Looks like we also have a call-in phone number ending in 95. Is that someone on the board?
Ali, the only one who's coming is Mr.
My name's
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Ending in 95?
Yeah, I'm just somebody from the block.
Okay.
Do you want to give me your name so I can just mark you for later while we have a moment?
Sure, Aviva Shapira.
Thank you.
Okay, Ali, I think we have a quorum, and Mr. Isaacson calling. He'll be a few minutes late,
Okay.
but he's coming. But we have a quorum. So we have Mr. Sable, Mr. Flansbaum, me, Mr. Garfield, and Mr. Rennett.
Yes.
So we have a quorum. So with that, I will call the meeting to order. Let's rise and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of
of
America.
America, to the republic for which we stand,
Stands
one nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with
Justice,
liberty
liberty,
and justice for all. Okay, Ali, can you please read them the certification of compliance?
The time, date, and location of this meeting was published in the Asbury Park Press and the Star Ledger and posted on the bulletin board in the office of the Township of Lakewood at least 48 hours in advance. The public has the right to attend this meeting, and reasonable comprehensive minutes of this meeting will be available for public inspection. This meeting meets the criteria of the Open Public Meetings Act.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Garfield,
Yes.
Mr. Stern, Mr. Sable,
Yes.
Flansbaum.
Here.
Mr. Herzl,
Here.
Mr. Renner,
Here.
Mr. Isaacson.
Here.
Hello, Mr. Meyer, Mr. Raitzik, Mr. Fuentes, Mr. Ackerman.
Okay, thank you. Swearing in of professionals, Mr. Jackson.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give before the truth, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but?
I do.
We are on public hearing. Ali, are there any changes to the published agenda?
No, I have no changes.
Okay, so then we'll start with number 1.
The first application up is SP 2293 for Knesset Base Yaakov of Lakewood. It's a minor subdivision as well as a preliminary and final major site plan for a synagogue located on James Street.
Okay. Dave, can you go through the report?
Yes, I can. Ally, would it be possible for you to share the screen and put up?
It's shared. Just tell her which page you want it to go to.
Yes, page 3 of the site plan. This way, we can walk the board through everything, both the subdivision and the site plan.
Do we want to do the subdivision first? Does the board have to act on that first?
I think we could do them together. It's actually worth discussing together.
Okay, so we'll start on the site plan letter.
Yeah, no, I'm more interested in you sharing the
They have to be granted first. So we can get to that.
page 3 of 20, and I'll go through the slides.
The board prefers to read the letter while you're doing that, and then I can put the plan up.
Okay, all right.
1 second.
Letters first, then.
1 second, and we have also waivers that we have to act upon before we go to anything. Ali, I just see you have all the submission waivers. So Dave, can you go through the submission waivers, and do you feel that we should grant them or not?
That's going to be a question that I think the board's going to have to look at, which is really why I wanted to share the screen so that we can go.
Give 1 second. You want Ali to show the screen,
That's
and then we'll go to the report? And then we go to the report?
I can go through the highlights of the report with that up on the screen. That's why.
Okay, no problem.
Let's do that. So what this is a minor subdivision and site plan for a synagogue. What's happening is that the original lot is L-shaped, basically encompasses the whole block except for the existing lot on the southeast, which is not part of this application. So the subdivision is subdividing the piece off along Edmonds and James for the synagogue and leaving the back piece vacant, which would have frontages on both Edmonds and Grantwood. There's no bulk variances associated with the subdivision. There are design waivers, those being Edmonds to the left will not be improved, and on the right side where Grantwood is, there's no street trees proposed in that shade tree and utility easement. Switching over to the site plan, which
Ali, thank you, Ali.
yeah.
Okay,
The building needs a height variance. It's proposed at 37.38 feet, where 35 feet is permitted.
it's less than 10%, right? That's
Correct.
what we-
Yeah, so it does stay before this board. Front yard setback, it needs it's only 2 feet from Edmonds whereas 30 is required. Side yard setback variance, once again, 2 feet where 10 is required. And a rear yard setback, 5 feet, whereas 20 is required. Another variance is requested for coverage, 37.2%, where 25% is permitted. Reliefs required for the number of off-street parking spaces. 23 are proposed on site, 37 are required. Relief is necessary from buffer requirements, 20-foot buffers required. And reliefs also required from off-street parking setback. It's only 3 feet from adjoining lot 3 to the right, whereas 5 is required. Also in design waivers, Edmonds is only being improved across a partial frontage of the property, doesn't go to the property limit. And no street trees are proposed on either frontage for this. So it begs the question, and we'll go to the submission waivers to decide if the board wants to.
Okay, 1 second, please. Ali, can you please go back to the report? Thank you. And I would like, first let's vote on the waivers, and then I would like to go through the report.
Right.
Or the variances to see. Okay. So,
At this time, the traffic study for this project is not complete yet. At least it wasn't for our review. The other submission waiver is regard to off-site features. However, there is enough shown on the plan where that's acceptable. We need a road profile, more information on the road profile for Edmonds.
Dave, let me ask something. The traffic study, is this on a county road or?
Yeah, James Street is a county road.
So they're gonna need regardless the traffic study for the county to approve it?
Absolutely.
So if we grant them the waiver, it's only for hearing purposes only. They're gonna need it when they submit to the county.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
no problem.
Yeah, what it is, they're updating a traffic study from 2018, which there was a different layout for this job, the previous plan that I don't think actually made it to public hearing. We had reviewed it, but it never got to public hearing.
Okay, what's with the rest of the waivers?
Yeah, the other one was environmental impact statement, and
Okay.
the site plan it's probably not an issue because it's probably far enough south from where wetlands are located to the north.
Okay, so David, you agree that we can grant the waivers for hearing purposes only?
You can. I guess the question is, looking at what the applicants requested, and I beg to ask the question too, there's a lot of vacant property left to the north, and the question that I'm going to have to ask, and the professionals should testify, why not make the proposed site plan lot larger, and you'd still have a significant land fronting Grantwood that you could do something else with?
Okay, so let's go one step at a time. We'll hear from the applicant's attorney in a second, or engineer. Right now, I would ask the board for a motion to grant the waivers just for the hearing purposes. Traffic study will be for the county, and the rest, Dave said, could be granted. We have a motion to go along.
I'll make the motion, Justin.
Okay, Justin moves. We have a second. I'll second it. All in favor? Aye. Okay, go back Dave, please go back to the report, or Ali, to the zoning. I would like to bring it up on the screen.
For the minor sub or for the site plan first?
The site plan, because there's no variances required for the minor subdivision, only those couple of design waivers I mentioned.
Okay, I think you read it into the record, but I would like you to see it.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Okay, that's it? Number 5 is the last? Yes. Oh, no.
7 is the last.
Okay, I have it. Is there anything, Dave, you would like to add, or can we go to the applicant?
I'll definitely go to the applicant's professionals, yes.
Okay, so who's the attorney on this application?
I am, Mr. Chairman. Good evening.
Okay,
Miriam Weinstein on behalf of Congregation Knesset Beis Yaakov of Lakewood. As has already been stated, this application is for one minor subdivision approval to create Lot 1.01, and then for preliminary and final site plan approval to construct a 3-story synagogue on that new Lot 1.01 that we're creating. As was pointed out, there are no variances associated with the minor subdivision. The site is located off of James Street and Edmonds Avenue, adjacent to the relatively new development known as the Preserve. This area has been developed with 50-plus new homes in recent years, with more to be built in the near future, and virtually no shul in the area. This shul is actually already in existence in a trailer on the site, with a sanctuary that is virtually the same size as the proposed sanctuary to be built. The shul has been operating out of this trailer for the last 2 years. It's a neighborhood shul, and hence most people walk to the shul for prayer services, even during the week. We are providing 23 parking spaces, and there is which is more parking spaces than there currently are, and there are no issues with the parking. But I shouldn't be testifying, so we'll let our professionals and a representative of the synagogue testify to that effect in a little bit. In addition, we have an agreement in place with the Beis Yaakov High School that is adjacent to this development to use their parking lot for overflow parking should the need. Now, to answer the question that Dave posed before, which is a good one, the shul has tried to acquire more land. The shul would love to acquire more land and was willing to pay for more land, but none is available for sale. Nobody will sell us any more land. I also, though, so this is really the parcel of land that we have to work with. I also do want to note that the only other parcel with frontage on Edmonds Avenue is Block 357, Lot 1, which is owned by the township and located in the Crystal Lake Preserve. So that parcel is highly unlikely to ever have anything built on it, making this lot a pretty good location to put a shul on. I also want to make it clear there will be no simcha hall in the basement. The hall that's there is a kiddush hall. It will be used strictly for Shabbos functions by members of the synagogue. And with that, I just want to call upon Mr. Flannery and ask to have him sworn.
okay, Mr. Jackson,
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you'll give before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Mr. Flannery? I don't hear you. Is Mr. Flannery muted?
I just unmuted. I do. Brian Flannery, licensed professional engineer and professional planner, Jackson, New Jersey. As indicated, this is an application for a minor subdivision to create a lot, which then there's a application for a site plan to construct a neighborhood shul. The minor subdivision is relatively simple in nature. It's virtually by right application, as indicated in the RVE report. On page 2, the site's in the R12 zone, and a house of worship is a permitted use. On page 3, it indicates that no bulk variances are required. And it indicates the design waivers that are required are for improving Edmonds Avenue along the frontage of proposed lot 1.02, which would more be a concern for the site plan portion of it, so I'll address that during that, as well as the providing street trees along Grantwood Avenue. With respect to the other items in the report, we would satisfy RVE during resolution compliance if the board acts favorably. With respect to the site plan application, it is a site plan, as Miriam described, for a neighborhood shul. There's a congregation already, and they have a temporary facility with roughly the same size sanctuary. So they need this size sanctuary. This is the only property that's available to them. So we need some bulk variance relief associated with that. As Miriam indicated, the area that developed around it, known as the preserve, has no other shul, and the school, also along James Street, has provided an agreement to allow shul to use that parking because the timing of when the shul needs the parking and when the girls' school needs the parking are offset, so there's parking available. The Lakewood ordinance does provide in section 18-807C under design, construction, and location of required parking. The applicant may provide parking on another parcel which may or may not be contiguous to the parcel, provided that the parking lot is within 1,000 feet from the parcel in which the principal building is located, and provided assurance is acceptable to the board that the parking remains available in the future. So the applicant, as part of resolution compliance, would provide those assurances to the board. The parking that's provided is less than 1,000 feet from the proposed shul, so it would be in accordance with the ordinance, and technically we would not need a variance for that. I will provide testimony to justify a C2 variance in case somebody feels the assurances aren't appropriate or for whatever reason, just out of an abundance of caution to provide that testimony. So then we get to the other variances, which certainly are not de minimis, but they're proposed because we have an existing congregation that needs a proper shul. This is the only property, and it's the size shul that would fit on it. I think, though, when you look at the location of the school, the shul, it's an excellent location because it's next to a township-owned property in the Crystal Lake Preserve. Miriam says would probably never be developed. I would indicate will never be developed. It was an agreement with the DEP that area is preserved open space, and the people in the DEP are certainly not inclined to change that. So the only property that also has frontage along this is the portion in the back that's being retained by the owner of the property, and he has access from an existing improved roadway with a cul-de-sac, which is currently in a temporary easement on his property. When the minor subdivision is approved, that area of the cul-de-sac would be dedicated, and it would become a dedicated township right-of-way. So that's a benefit to the township, benefit to the neighbors. The shul is certainly a benefit to the neighbors. The other variances are for building height. We're asking for 37.38, where 35 feet is required. Setback variances, we're asking for a minimum front setback variance to Edmonds Avenue of 2 feet, where 30 feet is required. Again, this is a road that's not being used by anybody else. It's more like a driveway for the shul. A minimum side yard setback variance is requested of 2 feet where 10 feet is required. That only impacts one property. That property owner has been provided public notice to the extent that he felt fencing or landscaping was needed to accommodate his buffering requirements. The applicant certainly would accommodate that. At a minimum rear yard setback of 5 feet where 20 feet is required, which again is to the newly created lot, which is being retained by the owner of the property, who is familiar with this application and has no objection to that. So they sound like very drastic variances that are being requested that even I can't call them de minimis. When you look at the impact, there's virtually no impact. We're asking for maximum building coverage of 37%, where 25% is required. When you look at it being next to the Crystal Lake Preserve and in the location it is, it's my opinion that that's also not detrimental. The parking relief, 23 are provided on site, 37 are required. The school within less than 1,000 feet has offered the parking. The congregation already uses the facility, the same site, without any traffic problem. It's on a county major collector road, so that's an appropriate location, and we need the approval. So any upgrades that are needed or anything that's needed to provide traffic safety would certainly be required by the county at that point. Relief is also required for the buffer requirements. 20-foot buffer is required, and again, the same reasoning with respect to the setbacks would apply to the buffering. Item 7 on page 5 is relief is required for proposed off-street parking, 3 feet from adjoining lot 3, where 5 feet is required. So the reasoning and the justification for the variance, if you look at the Lakewood Master Plan of 2017, the vision statement on page 7 says encourage growth and development in appropriate locations and consistent with established land uses. This is certainly consistent to the extent that the neighborhood needs a shul. There's an existing shul that's in a temporary facility, and this will provide a proper shul. The same page 7 says provide sufficient educational, recreational, and community facilities to meet future needs. This is going beyond meeting future needs. This is meeting a present need. The municipal land use law, NJSA 40:55 D2, under the purpose of the act. A is encourage municipal action to the appropriate use or development of all lands in the state in a manner which will promote public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. It's my testimony that this does this. As I indicated, it's my opinion these are all C2 variances. We need to show they relate to a specific piece of property. This is the only property that's available for the shul. The purpose of the municipal land use law, I've read. The variance can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good. And due to its location, it's only impacting 3 lots, one which is preserved open space owned by the township. One is the owner of the property, and then there's the lot on the corner adjacent to us, which was approved for duplexes, and the residents of those duplexes will need a shul, and this provides a benefit for them as well. The variance will not impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance, and due to the nature of it, that's my testimony. And the benefits have to substantially outweigh the detriments, and my testimony is that they do. Continuing in the report, design waivers from improving Edmonds Avenue along the entire project frontage. Edmonds is in a right-of-way that, in my opinion, will never be developed any further. It's more of a driveway access in the shul. Design waiver from providing street trees along James Street. And unfortunately, if you look at the site plan, due to the limited size of the lot and the need that we have, the only way to provide the shade trees would be to reduce some parking. And it's my testimony that the limited frontage on James Street with lots on each side, the one to the left, which is preserved open space, has plenty of trees, and that my opinion is the design waiver is justified. Under the review comments, there's a question on testimony whether a catering facility is being proposed, and the answer is a very affirmative no. Miriam indicated that in her opening. The item 4 references the trash enclosure, and obviously we need DPW approval. We've provided a place for cans. The intent would be to roll the cans out, but we will have to do whatever DPW requires with respect to that. Item 7 on page 6 suggests a turnaround be provided. To the extent any turnaround is needed by DPW, we will resolve that during resolution compliance. But my testimony is that the parking lot would provide for the turning movements, and the limited nature of it, the limited use, the use by members of this local shul It provides for adequate circulation. And any of the other comments in the report, we would satisfy RBE if the board acts favorably on the application. That's my, Mr. Chairman.
What was that?
That is,
Okay, Brian, you're putting sidewalks along the frontage of the property?
yes.
So we're on James Street and where?
And along the frontage of Edmonds, in front of our property, the Shul property.
Okay, and what's with the garbage? How are you picking up the garbage?
Garbage, we have a place for trash cans, and we would roll them out as required by DPW.
Okay, and how many parking spaces does the school have? They have ample parking spaces. They can give you, you have 37, and you need 37, and you're giving 24.
The 23, so we need 14 additional. The school certainly has well more than that, and Rabbi Katz has provided a letter. We will, if the board acts favorably, provide whatever assurances the board and their professionals feel are required to know that that availability will always be there. But it's only for 14 parking spaces, which our testimony is we don't need, but we're going to provide adequate assurances so that if there is a need in the future, in accordance with the ordinance requirements, that will be taken care of. But if the board isn't satisfied with that, my testimony is that it's a C2 variance. It's parking we don't need. It's a congregation that's there now and doesn't need it. It's adequate, but we want to go beyond adequate, and we would satisfy that during resolution compliance.
Mrs. Weinstein, a question for you. Are you familiar with this shul? Does this shul have 1 million in the morning, or do they have multiple million?
You know what I would really like to do is I was planning on calling a representative from the shul, Rabbi Holland. I just want to see if he's on.
I'm on here.
Okay, you have to be affirmed. I just want to make sure.
Let's have Rabbi Holland affirmed. I think he can answer all of your questions.
Okay. Rabbi Holland, you have to be affirmed by the attorney.
Yes.
Rabbi, do you swear affirm the testimony I'll give before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, state your name for the record, please.
Benjamin Holland.
Okay, Ali, you have the spelling of that? Okay, and where do you live?
I live on Grantwood, so I'm literally neighbors of the synagogue.
Okay. I had a question. If there's anything else you want to say, are you going to have multiple minyanim throughout the day, or just the 1 million in the morning? I just want to make sure that you have enough parking, because not when the school is in session.
Correct. We're expecting to have 1 million. It's not a factory. It's not used in that way. So it's
okay. Speak into the mic. You're breaking up.
You hear me now better?
Okay, yeah. You said that you're testifying there's going to be 1 million in the morning.
Correct.
So it shouldn't conflict with the school.
Correct.
Okay. Is there anything, Mr. Weinstein, anything else you want to put on the record?
Yes. Rabbi Holland, just how long has the shul been in existence in the trailer?
Okay, so the shul has existed 2 years. We are not looking to make a new shul to attract new congregants. This is literally a shul to facilitate the existing group that's been spending the 2 years coming to these trailers to pray and to study a little bit in the evening. And it's important to note, ultimately, we don't have an agenda that this should become a larger shul that attracts people from all over Lakewood. We just want to create a facility that can be utilized by families that live here, literally add, or we'll say higher quality of life. You'll ask me, how is a synagogue raising the quality of life? We have one in the trailers. The answer is very simple, that every child, everybody in this committee and this board has children that they want to inspire to do and be bigger and better. When you have a trailer as the place for your kids to come and connect their religion and to their beliefs, it's beautiful, it's great, it's limited. We're in a generation where everything's so gorgeous, everything out there in the world is gorgeous. So to not give our children in the community the opportunity to be proud and inspired is like we're robbing them of the opportunity. So this shul is about facilitating the existing group, giving the kids an inspirational opportunity to be inspired when they go pray, be connected, and higher the quality of our lives. We're all walking. We're not going anywhere else. We're here.
Rabbi Holland, I have a question for you. You're saying this is an existing shul. Most of the congregants live in the immediate area, or they're driving to shul?
In the immediate area. That's the next point. Because they all live here, I'm the neighbor.
If you can ask the rabbi to please speak louder or into the mic, please, Rabbi. I'm sorry.
Better now?
Not much.
No, Rabbi, for some reason, are you on a phone as well as your computer? Because both are lighting up.
No, I'm not. I'm on the iPad. Would it be better if I joined my phone? Or would that help you?
No, I'm going to mute whoever it is that I mislabeled as you because I don't think that's you.
Mine is Benjamin Holland. Do you hear me now?
Yeah. Okay, now it's better.
Okay, so my point I wanted to make, which is going back to Mr. Herzl's other point, is that we do not attract people from outside. That's why, as a neighbor on Grantwood, I see every morning and evening when I'm here that we're never maxed out in our parking. It never disturbs my block, and I'd be the first one to say it did, because I want my quality of life to be high, and it has not impacted or changed any of our parking issues on the block at all. And I'm quite confident that somebody who lives on Grantwood and will be impacted by a change, that this new synagogue, this meaning the new building, will have zero effect on my parking or on the parking, because it's a neighborhood shul where essentially everybody's walking. So I think it's important to note that, because I'm saying this from a very unique advantage point where I live on the block. And I would tell you if it's differently, because it would really bother me. So it's important to note that. And it's important to note that, I'm going to say something now that, it's not my place, but we would really appreciate if the board would realize how much we want our children to have a proper experience. And the quicker we can get this approved, we believe the inspiration for our kids will be there with this nice synagogue. So it's not about fancy synagogues, it's about inspiration for the next generation. So the quicker we could get this accepted, approved, the quicker we can help our kids be inspired. And I sincerely believe that.
Okay, Rabbi Holland, I have another question for you. I just want to put on the record. You're affiliated with the shul, right?
I'm a congregant.
Okay. Is the shul going to have a simcha hall that's open to the public? I want to put it on the record.
My understanding is that there is no simcha hall that's being used. It will be used for a kiddush when I make my son's celebration for bar mitzvah, those type of things, which is obviously, as you know, is a small little cake and, nothing since major, is my understanding of what the purpose for it is.
It's not open to the public as a whole.
And I'm being honest with you, we don't get people from outside coming. This is literally a community synagogue.
Okay. Mrs. Weinstein, is there anything else you want to put on the record with Rabbi Holland?
I think Rabbi Holland actually covered everything that I wanted him to cover.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi Holland. And any board members have any questions from Brian or Rabbi Holland?
Dave Garfield here.
Yes, hi, Mr. Garfield, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if it's more of a statement or anything, but the land was there, and you want to take it over and put up a edifice. But we knew what the size of the land was. I don't understand, except you exceeded every ruling that's in the master plan even. The only thing, how deep you go is the only one we missed. I'm not being facetious, I'm sorry. It just doesn't make sense to me. You knew the size of the land, why the building wasn't made to fit the land, and the parking, hopefully you have enough parking, but I haven't seen a facility in town here that had enough parking when they met the requirements.
Okay, Mr. Flanagan, would you like to answer?
I'm happy to answer that, Dave. The situation here is that this is the only lot available for the shul. So we could have put a smaller shul on there, but it wouldn't fit the congregation. So if it doesn't fit the congregation, it doesn't work. The only way the congregation fits is if we get relief from the board, and that's why I gave the testimony on the C2 criteria of the benefits outweighing the detriments. And as I indicated, a lot of the shuls that go in other neighborhoods, they have neighbors on all sides, and there's a potential for negative impacts. This particular shul, to the west of it, is the Crystal Lake Preserve. And I hunted there for years, so I know those deer, they're not going to complain. They're just going to move somewhere else and eat different stuff. They got that whole Crystal Lake Preserve to be in. The prop to the rear of it is the property that's being retained by the owner of the property that was only willing to give this much, and he's okay with it. And then on the other side, we have a lot where 2 duplexes are proposed. The only people that it could impact are Grantwood, and those are the residents that are members of the congregation, and they've all been noticed. So when we open it to the public, if there's people that surprise me that have been noticed and are objecting, but looking at the input so far, the neighborhood is overwhelmingly in favor of the application. And I think that's the important thing to look at when you're looking at C2 variance, benefits versus detriments. If the neighbors aren't suffering and the congregation is benefiting, that's the purpose of a C2 variance.
So Brian, basically you're saying that this is the only piece of property that's available in the immediate area, and this is the size you need for the.
Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I think what David's question is why did they leave this little parcel of land? The developer, who I believe is the owner of the school next door, knew that this community was going to need a shul. So why didn't they leave a bigger parcel of land for it to be normal without having 5-foot setbacks on every side? That's Dave's question. I don't think there's a good answer, but that's, I think, his question.
There's not a good answer, because the one to answer that would have been the developer, and the time to ask that question maybe would have been when the application was submitted. At this point, the congregation doesn't have a good answer. They're here with their hand out asking for relief, and we provided testimony on why we feel the relief is warranted, because, again, the C2 variance, you have to weigh the benefits and the detriments, and the benefits are clear. The congregation has a proper shul. The detriments, my testimony is that the detriments are de minimis. It looks bad on paper, but in real life, I don't think it's that bad. And
Chairman,
within 200 feet, their opinion when the board.
One second.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
just come back on that. What are you going to do when the building needs major maintenance? You don't have room in the side for a truck to pull in. I don't see how you can even give proper maintenance.
The area that's there is enough for maintenance. It makes it more expensive and more difficult. I'm assuming the shul, when they build it, are going to build it with, when you look at the architecturals, it's a very nice building. So clearly they're going to use the most maintenance-free materials there are, but there is room to maintain it. It'll just be more expensive. And unfortunately, that's an expense they'll have to bear at some point in the future, but they don't have a choice.
Hi, this is Abe Albeck. If you'd like me to be affirmed, I can test it as the builder.
One second, please. Mr. Garfield, does that answer you?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm here.
Mr. Herzl,
Yeah.
if I may make a suggestion, listening to the questions from the board, a suggestion that may make this a little more palatable to the board may be to, there's certainly no reason to improve Edmonds all the way to the north limit, because that's going across vacant frontage. But maybe just improving it to the end of this proposed lot, put a hammerhead turnaround at the end, and what that will do, it will provide on-street parking along Edmonds, and that would help the situation.
Okay. Mr. Orbach, are you the builder on this?
Yes.
Okay. You want to testify to what Dave answered, but you have to be affirmed.
Sure.
Okay, Mr.
From testimony to give before this board be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do. Abe Albeck, Lakewood, New Jersey. I just wanted to clarify that as far as maintenance is concerned, it is possible doing this building for almost 20 years or so, even though it isn't tight space. It is possible, though, albeit it is more difficult. But maintenance is possible, and I have no concern at all that it can be built and maintained in these tight spaces.
Okay, now, did you hear Dave's comment?
Yes, that is actually, it's not a bad idea. Ali, if I could trouble you to pull up the plan real quick. Do you have access to that, Ali?
Because that would at least, but then technically you wouldn't need a variance on the parking. You have on-street parking, which is a road that doesn't go anywhere.
You're saying to just go ahead and improve that on that street.
Right. How many more parking, Dave? How many more street parking spaces would you get on the with a hammerhead?
I'm not really sure, but you certainly get more than 10 because you can actually both sides.
If the board feels it's necessary, then the applicant is willing for that.
Okay. I think it's a good middle way to make sure that we don't have any future parking issues over there.
Dave, good idea.
It certainly improves the situation. There's no question about that.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Any other board members have any questions?
Yes, timetable.
Mr. Rennett.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to address, I mean, I think it's an application that's needed. It's a shul that's needed for the neighborhood. I'm in favor of it. My concern is down the block, there was a similar shul that was approved, using shared parking, the same story, and James Street many times. There are cars parked along James Street, and sometimes cars are sticking out. The shoulder's not available. Is there any way, I know it's not our jurisdiction, it's a county road, could we make this contingent somehow on getting no parking signs along James Street within 100 feet of this property on both sides?
The applicant would certainly be amenable to making that request, but with the application to the county and indicating that it was a request of the Lakewood Planning Board.
Could you just change it or to make it a requirement of the Lakewood Township Planning Board?
I could tell them it's a requirement of Lakewood Planning Board, but they've been doing this a long time, just as I am, and they know the Lakewood Planning Board can't require it. So I'll do it any way you'd like.
Can I just address that for a second?
One second. Mr. Renate, are you finished?
I'm basically finished. I'd like this to, I mean, if the county understands that this was a requirement of the planning board, I'm sure they'll grant it.
Mr. Renate, we can make a motion.
The planning board, they would grant it.
I would just ask them.
Okay, 1 second. You have to be affirmed if you testify. Mr. Frank, Mr. Jackson.
Yes, please, do you swear from testimony to give before this board with the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. We just had the exact same story.
Let's state your name for the record.
Joshua Schmuckler, New Lines Engineering Chief Operating Officer. We just had.
I'm sorry. I know who you are. Just want for the record.
I appreciate it.
Okay.
We had the exact same story in Rain Tree Shul, where the county actually came to us, the applicant, and said, hey, we want you guys to go to the township and ask for no parking signs in front of the shul on the county road. So the county will be more than happy to do it. But the caveat is we can only do it in front of our property. We can't go in front of other property owners, other properties and say, hey, we have no parking signs in front of your lot. In front of our lot, I'm sure the county will say yes. I'm sure the town will say yes. It puts a hardship on us from other people's lots because if they say no, we're stuck.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I'll put it in front of your lot then. Sure.
Okay. Any other board members have any questions?
Yeah, Chaim Sable has a question.
Yes, Chaim, please go ahead.
Mrs. Weissman, Miriam Weissman, she indicated that they have an agreement with Beis Yaakov to park over there. I guess if we can see that would be amazing. And even if we don't see that, in front of next door where the seller doesn't want to sell, the owner of the development, there's no sidewalk over there. So how do we expect congregants to walk safely from their houses to the shul on James Street? There's no sidewalk in front of, I know we cannot put sidewalk next door, but we have to figure out something to put sidewalk over there.
May I,
So in front of, between the property, the Virginia subject property and Grantwood, there's no sidewalk.
may I answer that?
Yes, yes, Rebbe.
So I live on Grantwood, and essentially there's 2 other blocks adjacent to me before you get to Beis Yaakov, and everybody has access and everybody's able to walk to the shul, not just by walking on James, but there's space on many different ways to go. And if you actually would come look one morning by Chakras or look by Netmar, you will see that there's easy access from many different angles. And it will work that people can walk, whether it's on the side of the building. They don't necessarily have to just go through James, and everybody's easy about it. There's no issues, nobody has problems. It's a very easy neighborhood, and they're very accommodating. So you don't have a lot of complicated people holding each other back. Everybody just wants to make it work, so they have a higher quality of control.
Okay.
I appreciate what you're saying, but we don't have a sidewalk leading to the shul. We expect everybody to walk from home, but we don't have a sidewalk in front of their property. Therefore, there's
Through the chair.
chain link.
This is
Yeah,
Justin.
well,
This is Justin.
Justin.
And we
sorry.
can talk about the sidewalk. The bottom line is these people don't own the property next door, so we can't do anything about the sidewalk. I drive
can't
by
put sidewalk over there?
every morning on my way to the office, and I've never seen one person walking on the street. I got to say, I drive by during chakras every morning. There's cars parked on site. I've just never seen anybody walking on the street. So, but I understand what Rabbi Holland's saying. And the bottom line is it's somebody else's property. So unless we have a suggestion, I think we should just move on.
Okay.
Can we put on a sidewalk anyways?
Not if
Can
it's
we
not
get
your
the-
problem.
Mr. Chairman.
I think we had the owner of. I think we had
You're
the
one
owner
at a
of that
time.
property.
Mr.
So
Chairman.
I'm in the middle of talking and just not to interrupt. I think
Yeah,
we
one
have,
second.
we
So
have the
Mr.
owner
Sable,
of-
finish.
We have the owner of the next door property. Somebody mentioned that he's on the line. Can we ask him if he would
Do you
agree
know
to
his
put a
name?
sidewalk?
You know his name, Mr. Sable?
I think somebody mentioned that he's on the line. Maybe Mr. Schmuckler has an idea if he's on the line. Can we ask him if he was willing to allow us to put sidewalk?
As long as it's right away, we can put sidewalks. We don't have a problem with any sidewalks. As long as there's enough right away, we can do it. As Dave knows, sometimes the right of way jogs and someone didn't donate land. Sidewalks are usually put in the actual county or township right of ways, not on people's property. I don't think the applicant minds putting in sidewalks, as long as there's space, and we'd have to just delineate that in our surveys.
Yeah, the issue you have on this right now, in order to put sidewalk across lot 3, you would need an easement from that owner of lot 3. The property line is virtually going to the street pavement right now.
Is the owner from lot 3 on listening to this thing right now?
Isn't it Mr. Katz?
I don't know.
If lot 3 ever develops, I'm sure they're gonna have to put sidewalks in. We're happy to try doing it. We just can't guarantee it.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Katz?
Yes, Mr. Garfield.
Yeah, thank you. Question, if you're going to give, by expanding the situation, more parking spaces, but you said before the parking spaces weren't a problem, you wouldn't need them. Could the building be adjusted to give you some space around it? Since you don't need, maybe possibly you said you probably wouldn't exceed the parking that's there. Maybe the building could be adjusted to give you some room.
The problem with that is that the building is already full at capacity at this size in the trailer. That's why the building was made this size. It won't fit the community if you make it any smaller.
Okay, and I think we went through that already, and I think you also, Brian
Just
testified.
geometry of it.
Okay, I think Brian testified, or Mr. Orbach testified, they agree to pave the rest of Edmond Road to pick up another minimum 10 parking spaces on the road, which will basically bring it very close to not having a variance.
I can't guarantee 10, but whatever we could fit.
Whatever you can fit, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
correct. Thank you.
That's
Thank
fair.
you.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd rather see the school expanded into those 10 spaces and a little space around it for people, even if they want to congregate. Outside, there's no room except standing in James Street.
Okay. At this time, I would like to open it up to the public. Ali, do we, Mr. Jackson?
I believe we have a number of public comments that we received. I think Kristen from John's office is here on that. John?
They're all the same. I'd like just have a summary on them. And I'll go through all of them.
Hold on, I don't. Oh, see Kristen. Oh, there she is. Kristen, do you have a summary on that?
Ali, could you please mute whoever's, I hear some feedback, somebody's talking. I don't know who it is. Okay, thank you, it's much better now. No.
It wasn't the road.
Challenger, we need a shul.
There is no sidewalks, there's not.
Okay, please, one at a time.
Maybe Kristen's unmuting people, I'm not sure, because all of a sudden everyone's making noise.
No, that's easy.
Please, please refrain from speaking right now. We can only speak one at a time. Talk one at a time.
How many cases do you have?
Okay, it's Mr. Gazarovski.
That question for me?
Mr. Chairman, I'll have to go through them.
Okay.
You just give me a minute. I mean, we have one from,
Mr. Jackson, there may be people, I see a lot of names that I don't recognize. People may have logged on, they wanted to speak personally. I don't want to read their emails and have them speak.
There are 72 emails, so to cross-reference those with the people here would take a lot of time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just really quickly, the 72 that are in the file are all positive, aside for one, Mr. Zinas, who wrote in that we should look at the subdivision prior to looking at the site plan and do it as two separate applications. But besides that, they're all positive.
Thank you, Ellie.
Okay, thank you.
And the record to reflect that the board has had the ability to look at these and has looked at them. So they've all been read, which is the whole idea of putting them in advance, and they're all part of the record.
Okay, now, so let's open it up. That record has been made. Now let's open to the public. Ali, if you could unmute everybody. And if anybody's here would like to speak on this application, one at a time, please state your name.
If you've submitted a letter and the board, and it's on file, you can't speak again. So we'll go by the honor system on that.
I don't know.
One at, everybody, one, wait, please.
Unless it's a different comment based on the
Going on there, what about you?
Okay, everybody, please keep quiet. We have to have a record over here.
He suggested 1.5 parking spaces per unit.
Ali, is everybody unmuted?
I'm working on it. Hopefully Kristen's not doing it at the same time. We would be negating each other.
Okay.
We do have that 5% rebate. That 1% rebate with that.
I believe everyone's unmuted.
Okay, is there anybody in the public who would like to comment on this application? If yes, please state your name.
Yeah, that's in our code. We have time, but let's say.
I'm gonna mute Glenn Lines. Obviously Glenn's not speaking on that. And I'm muting ML because that's the one that's having a conversation in the background. Ashley Brand, I believe, is here on a different application. I'm gonna mute her.
Okay, I see somebody, Hannah Spiegel. Do you want to speak on this application?
No, not on this one.
Okay, thank you. Abby Hirsch.
Hello, get the green screen.
Is there somebody, Abby Hirsch over here?
Hi, Hannah Spiegel.
Nobody. Ashley Brin.
I feel like saying something.
Is somebody Ashley Brin? Okay. Is there anybody with the last digits 02? Here. What? Anybody with the letter B? Okay. Mr. Jackson, I will close it to the public right now.
Okay.
Okay, and I would ask for a motion on this application. Any board members?
I'll make a motion.
Justin, you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the application as presented, with the conditions that the applicant's gonna improve, what's that
Edmund.
street on the west side? Edmonds, what's it
Right.
called? Edmonds, they'll improve Edmonds to add a few additional parking spaces. And I think that was what we discussed, right?
Yeah, everything. I'll just add a few things that there's,
No parking signs.
Oh, right, and yeah, they'll make a request to Ocean County that the Lakewood Township Planning Board would like to see no parking in front of their property on Jane Street. Yeah.
and the simple hole will be for congregants only.
Yeah, simple for
and that'll
congregants
come-
only, yeah, all the conditions that the applicant presented, yep.
Okay, do we have a second to that?
I'll second
the
it.
motion, Ellie.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Garfield,
No.
Mr. Sable. Mr. Sable? Is he still there? He's muted. Oh, mute. Hi, try again. I unmuted you, Mr. Sable. No answer.
See you.
Mr.
Although
Oh,
we
somebody
may-
keeps unmuting Adam. I keep remuting Adam Pfeffer. Mr. Flansbaum,
Yeah, yes.
Mr. Herzl,
Yes,
Mr. Renner,
Yes.
Mr. Isaacson.
Yes.
okay, so we have a quorum who voted.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear anything from Levy or Heim, so I didn't hear a quorum.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr.
Okay.
Sable, do you want to vote? No, okay, I have 4 affirmative and 1 negative even without Mr. Sable.
So for the record, we had a quorum even without Mr. Sable.
Do we want to give Mr. Sable the opportunity to text it on the screen share here?
Good. Mr. Sable, if you're there, want to text your motion?
I don't know if John will allow a texted motion.
Okay, well, motion is approved. It was 4-1, motion approved. Let's continue on with the agenda.
Thank you so much.
Let's,
Good
I
night.
don't know if someone could reach out for Mr. Sable, and I'd like to give him a chance to be on this.
Ali, is Chaim Sable in twice? I see one Chaim and one Chaim Sable, but that's somebody else.
Let me try to call him just to find out what the issue is, because we might need him on a different case.
We do need
This is
him.
both for the subdivision and site plan, correct?
Yes.
For the record, I am here. It's JK.
Oh, hi, Jakey. Good.
I'm sorry, Jake, I forgot you came. Did you want to have a vote on that motion?
If you heard the whole.
It's too late on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's continue because we have now 6 members. Even if Mr. Rennett can't sit on one.
We have 7.
Yeah, Chaim Sable's back?
Oh, I'm sorry, we have 7 if Mr. Sable's here.
Let me just deal with him for 1 minute and then I'll report back. Hold on, I'm gonna go on mute for a second.
Okay.
He said, go with the next application. He switched to a different phone and he didn't know he was muted, but he said, that's okay. Go on to the next application. He's.
Okay, Ali, you want to go on to number 2?
The next application is SP 2418 for 400 Lewin LLC. It's a major site plan for a warehouse on 400 Lewin Ave.
Okay. 1 second, Dave. Let Ali bring up the report. Okay, Dave, would you like to go through the report, please? Is Mr. Mango here? Agno.
He's probably
Dave?
muted.
Ali, I
About
can't
that?
wait. I can't wait till they go back into the township.
Yeah, really. Talking to nobody there. Okay.
Good. Let's start with the waivers again.
Yeah, right. This is a site plan, lot 1.03.
It's the same waivers as the other application.
It is similar.
You just copy and paste it.
Well, not exactly.
Okay.
This is on Lewin Avenue, which I think the board is pretty familiar with lately. A site plan for lot 1.03. It's on the west side of Lewin Avenue, north of Prospect. If you recall, you just had application further to the north on this. So the fact that there's a submission waiver from a traffic study is kind of now a moot point, because if you recall, the school further north and that considered this project and all the other existing projects on Lewin, that there's gonna be a need for a traffic signal on Lewin and Prospect. So based on that, I think you can grant the submission waivers that are in our report.
Okay. Do we have a motion to go along with engineers' recommendations?
I'll move. JK.
Moved by Jakey. Who seconded? Dave
Second.
Mr. Garfield, second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. On to zoning.
Okay, this isn't really clear, but it appears that there's only one variance that's required for front yard setback along Lewin. It looks like the building will actually be 45 feet from Lewin Avenue, where 50 is required. That's the only variance. And there's a couple of design waivers, one from buffer and the other one for driveway width on the north side of property. There's a 50-foot wide driveway. I believe that's for tractor trailers is the reason for the requested design waiver.
Okay,
So that's all we have as far as zoning and design waivers.
thank you. Ali, who's the attorney on this application?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Adam Pfeffer, attorney on behalf of the applicant.
Okay.
As Dave indicated, this is a preliminary and final major site plan application for construction of a proposed warehouse with supporting office space for a growing granite business. This is an end user looking to accommodate his business. With regard to the location, the property is in the M1 zone. Warehouses are a permitted use. As far as the front yard setback variance, it's really not a variance. It's more of an architectural feature. I will let Brian Flannery address that when we swear him in. But basically, but for that, the architectural design, we really are a conforming application. At this time, if I can have Mr. Flannery sworn in, and then Mr. Chairman, I would just ask him, once he's sworn in, if you would accept him as his credentials.
Yes.
For this field. Thank you very much.
Mr. Jackson?
You swear affirm testimony to give before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do. I'm Flannery Jackson, New Jersey, licensed professional engineer and professional planner. As indicated, this is an application for a warehouse in the M1 zone. And as Dave pointed out, there was the application further north on Lewin for the school at the last meeting. Looking at Dave's report, as he indicated, under zoning, the warehouses and with offices are permitted use in the M1 zone. The front yard setback, as indicated in the report, is to architectural features. The ordinance indicates that architectural features would not necessarily count with respect to the front setback. I will provide testimony and justification out of an abundance of caution for the 45 feet where 50 feet is required. But this is on a dead end industrial street, and my testimony based on the 2017 master plan, the vision statement says encourage development and redevelopment based on smart growth planning principles. My testimony is that this accomplishes that. It fits in there with the surrounding uses. The municipal land use law, NJSA 40:55B, under the purpose of the act is A, encourage municipal action to guide the appropriate use or development of all lands in a state in a manner which will promote public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. And it's my testimony that this approval will be compatible with the school that was approved just north of it. G, under the same provision of the municipal land use law, is to provide sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of agricultural, residential, recreational, commercial, and industrial uses. And this does this. As Adam indicated, this is an end user that's looking for a facility to house its business. And it's an excellent rateable and the development of the property. For C2 variances, we need to show that relates to a specific piece of property. We have a lot on a dead end street in the industrial zone that's fits properly for this property. The purpose of the municipal land use law I had read. The variance can be granted without any substantial detriment to the public good, and certainly the architectural features, we could remove them, and the building would look as nice. There's no adverse impact by having those architectural features, and the benefit is it's a much nicer looking building and a much better rateable. The variance will not impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance, and the benefits outweigh the detriment. Continuing in the report, their design waivers from providing a 25-foot buffer. My testimony is that the intent of the ordinance is provided with what we've provided, and that buffers really aren't needed due to the specific use and type of the property. And then the design waiver for the 50-foot wide driveway instead of 30, which we seem to be getting on a lot of the applications, and maybe the next master plan that hopefully I'm not going to be involved in. Somebody will suggest that some thought be given to that provision of the ordinance to make an amendment so that when you have an application of this type where the 50 feet is better, we don't have to spend time discussing that. Item 4 on page 5 of the report indicates that the revised plans reduce the parking to 56 spaces, but it's still more than the 50 parking spaces that are required. With respect to the site operations, it's a granite business. It's a typical industrial business, which would be from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. They have a showroom with a maximum of 3 employees, and they would have 10 employees in the warehouse. And they get deliveries in once a week, and they have 3 trucks that make deliveries out. So it's a very low intensity type industrial use, well suited for this area. With respect to the traffic, as Dave had indicated, based on the school being there, it creates a situation where a traffic light is appropriate. The school will be dealing with the county. Will also need county approval, and this applicant will pay his fair share of the traffic light, the same as the school will pay their fair share of the traffic light. There was a comment about improvements that were required based on the subdivision approval that created this lot on Prospect Street. Obviously, Prospect Street is a county road that would be dealt with at the county level, but our position is that this applicant bought a lot. The subdivision that created it needed a bond, and they're the responsible party to fix it, just like a homeowner that buys in a subdivision is not responsible for the off-site improvements of the subdivider of the property if he goes to put on a deck or anything else. So all of the other items in the report, we would comply with we would satisfy RVE if the board acts favorably on the application.
Okay, thank you. Any board members have any questions for Mr. Flannery?
Yes. I have
Mr.
one question.
Mr. Garfield?
Yes, on this property here, when the building goes up, will they be doing any grinding or shaping of the granite?
Any of the operations on the granite will be inside the building, and it'll be limited, and it will comply with all the noise and dust and all the other provisions of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other board members have any questions for Mr. Flannery? Okay, we'll open to the public. Ally, is there anybody from the public who would like to be heard on this application?
I did not get any emails.
Okay,
I don't know if there's anyone here.
is there anybody in the audience who would like to comment on this application?
Kristen, is your connection fixed? Are you able to unmute people, or should I do that? Okay, I'll go through and unmute people.
You didn't hear me? Hello?
I hear you now. Thank you.
Yeah, I can unmute.
Okay.
Placed on file with each municipality where there's ongoing site remediation. It's anticipated that RP may need to be retained as part of the construction team. Current tanks, lines, pumps. So it needs to be removed. All remediation regulations.
That's everyone.
Okay, is there anybody in the audience who would like to comment on this application only? Okay, we'll close it to the public. And Cindy, if you can please mute everybody besides the board members. And I would ask for a motion on this application.
I'll make a motion to approve this application as presented.
Mr. Meyer moves. Do we have a second?
Second by Justin.
Justin seconds. Roll call, please.
Mr. Garfield.
Yes.
Mr. Sable.
Yes.
Mr. Flansbaum.
Yes.
Mr. Herzl.
Yes.
Mr. Rennert.
Is she muted?
I'm looking. Mr. Rennert, are you there?
Is this the one he recused himself on?
No.
No, it's the next one, but I don't see his name anymore. Maybe he dropped. Okay. Mr. Isaacson. Yes, we have a quorum without him.
Okay.
Mr. Isaacson.
Yes.
And Mr. Meyer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
On to number 3. Mr. Sable back, or he's not here either?
Yes, he is. He responded to the roll call.
Okay. Okay, on to number 3.
The next application is SD 2481 for 301 Spruce Street LLC. It's a major subdivision. It was to create 6 lots. I believe the plans have been revised for 5 on Spruce Street and Pine View Road.
Okay. Dave, can you go through the report?
Yes,
give Ali a second to bring it up, please.
Okay.
I would like the public to see it too. Okay. Are there any waivers on this one?
Okay, yes, this is an application for major subdivision. The revised plans propose to subdivide existing lot 6 in block 841 and lot 1 in block 842 into 5 family lots in cul-de-sac road. And there are a number of submission waivers, and I believe the reason for a long list of submission waivers is that before the applicant decides to expend funds to do soils work for on septic systems, they want to see if they have a viable project with the board. So I guess whoever's testifying for the applicant, if they could give us some testimony on the submission waivers so the board could take action on it.
Okay,
I'd be happy to do that if I get sworn in.
okay. Mr. Flannery, Mr. Jackson, could you swear in Mr. Flannery? Mr. Jackson, are you there?
I'm here. My unmute bar wasn't working. I don't know why, but Mr. Flannery, do you swear a firm testimony you will give before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Brian Flannery, Jackson, New Jersey, licensed professional engineer and professional planner.
Brian, you're giving the testimony on the granting the waivers.
Yes, as
Okay.
Dave indicated, these are.
Brian, Mr. Chairman, do you accept Mr. Flannery as an
Yes, I
expert?
do. Yes.
Thank you.
As Dave indicated, we're asking for these waivers for submission purposes only. We will provide all the information that's required as part of resolution compliance if the board acts favorably on the application.
Okay. Dave, are you okay with it?
Yes, the board
Okay.
Take action.
Okay. Do we have a motion to go along with engineer's recommendation to grant the waivers for hearing purposes only?
Moved by Justin.
Justin moves. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Meyer. All in favor? Aye. Okay, on to, Dave, back to you. On to zoning.
Yes, the application is requesting minimum lot area variances for 4 of the 5 lots. They're basically proposing lots in the range of just over 30,000 square feet to 30,356 square feet. 40,000 square foot is required, and they've left lot 5 as oversized at 75,000 square feet. The plans also require some lot width variances for lots 3 and 4, and our recommendation is really to equal up the lot sizes somewhat. I mean, you're still going to have to have some minimum areas, but at least equalize them out so that you can eliminate the width variances. And lastly, because they are big lots, they're only showing 4 off-street parking spaces per lot, and we want to have testimony to confirm that they're not looking for any off-street parking relief. And they need some additional shade trees because of the size of the project to comply with the ordinance and not have a design waiver from shade trees. That's the zoning and design waivers. Turn it back to the applicant's professional.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Who's the attorney on this application?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Adam Pfefferton on behalf of the applicant. As Dave indicated, when the application was originally submitted, it was for 6 lots. However, there were some issues raised both by some neighbors and in the engineer's report, indicating that there might be some issues with going to the 6th lot in this application. The application has been amended and has been a new review letter has been submitted. If the board, I'm not sure if this board is familiar, this area of Lakewood, while we're in the R40, it's almost like an estate zone, and there have been several applications, I believe mostly at the zoning board level, to make much smaller lots in this area. This applicant has worked with almost all of the neighbors in the area to come up with what seems like it makes sense as it fits in, because with the scheme of the neighborhood, in that the majority of the lots in this neighborhood are around the same 30,000 square feet that this applicant is seeking. This applicant, for the most part, again, is really end users. These are people who live in the area, who want to stay in this area, but need larger lots and larger houses for their growing families. They've identified this parcel, and like I said, they have worked with neighbors, and I've read through most, if not all, of the comments I saw that were posted in the on this folder online, and the majority of them had said that indicated that this applicant has met with them and has created an application that really fits in with the scheme of what's being of what's existing today. I do know that Mr. Gazarovski is here on behalf of one of the neighboring property owners who does have an objection, and we'll get to that when we get to that. I know Brian has already been sworn in. If we can, I don't think he needs to be resworn. He's been sworn in for this application. I would ask him to address the technical questions in the review letter.
Adam would probably also like to ask if you accept my qualifications as a professional, especially in light of the fact that we have an objecting attorney.
Yeah, I think they already did, but we'll get it a second time. Mr. Chairman, you accept Mr. Flannery's qualifications? I think you're muted. Mr. Chairman, I think you're muted.
Okay. Brian, go ahead, but the oath is on the zoning also, not just on the waivers, what you took before.
Yes.
Okay, so please,
the question was, has the board accepted my qualifications as a professional?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So this application, as indicated, is a 5.08 acre parcel in the R40-20C cluster zone. So I hear it referred to as the R40. It's not the R40. It's specifically listed as the R40/20 cluster zone. When you look at the UDO section 18-901, when it lists these zones, number 45 on the list is residential cluster R40-20C. So going to the Dave's comments, number 1 under zoning indicates that single-family detached housing is a permitted use in the zone. As with respect to the minimum lot area variances, I would respectfully disagree with Dave's interpretation. I wouldn't call it wrong, because this is one of the rare instances where the Lakewood zoning ordinance isn't as clear as it should be. There's no section in the ordinance that describes the R40-20C cluster zone. To me, as a planner, the R40-20C cluster is very obvious. If you have 80,000 square feet, you can break it up into two 40s, a 20 and a 60, a 30 and a 50. The intent with the cluster is that you don't exceed the density of 40,000 square feet per dwelling unit, but you can use clustered down smaller lots consistent with the R20 zone. It would be nice if the Lakewood ordinance had a provision that described it, because then we wouldn't have to have a difference of opinion between myself and Dave. And that would be another thing for the next master plan update, again, that hopefully I'm not involved in. But with that view of an R40-20C, all of the lots conform with both the area and the width. An R20 requirement for lot area is 20,000 square feet. The minimum we have is 30. The R20 requirement for lot width minimum is 100, and we have 100 foot as our minimum. So based on a logical planning perspective, that works. With the absence of it, I will give the testimony for the justification for the variances, because they would be C2 variances, where we need to show the benefits outweigh the detriments, and certainly it's my opinion that does that. As Adam indicated, this is a neighborhood that has a lot of 30,000 square foot lots, and this board has not seen a lot of applications in this neighborhood, because the applications that I've done in this neighborhood, and there've been several, have gone to the zoning board because of a density issue. And the neighbors that come out on those applications indicate the majority of the lots are 30,000, you should be building 30,000 square foot lots. And I think when the board opens this to the public, the neighbors will make clear their concern on it. I know that the neighbors, it's not a popularity contest, but I think when you're looking at, is there any adverse impact on the neighbors are the best ones to make that determination. So again, with respect to the C2 variances that we're requesting, if you look at the Lakewood Master Plan of 2017, on page 2, the background information, it goes into all the population growth that's occurred. It concludes on page 3. Based on this information, is therefore important that Lakewood plan for residential development to house its growing population. And this is an area that's going to provide 5 beautiful lots in what could be referred to as an estate zone. It's on a dead-end street that doesn't get a lot of through traffic. You can't say there's no traffic because there's no place in Lakewood that has no traffic, but it's a limited traffic, and it's a nice residential area. You go to the page 7 of the same master plan of 2017 under division statement. It says encourage growth and development in appropriate locations consistent with established land uses. This is consistent with the established land uses. The municipal land use law, NJSA 40:55D2, under the purpose of the act, A is to encourage municipal action to guide the appropriate use or development of all lands in a state in a manner which will promote public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. It's my testimony that this does this. E is to promote the establishment of appropriate population densities and concentrations that will contribute to the well-being of persons, neighborhoods, communities, regions, and preservation of the environment. And it's my testimony that this does this in that the density that's allowed by the R40 20 cluster is 1.09 dwelling units per acre. We're proposing a density of 0.984, which is 90% of what's permitted. For the C2 variances, we need to show that it relates to a specific piece of property. We have 2 lots in this zone on this particular street that I think this relates specifically to a piece of property. It's an odd-shaped piece of property. That the other permitted uses would be schools. I don't think the neighbors would want to see schools. I don't think it's an appropriate location for a school. We have to show that the purpose of the municipal land use law would be advanced, and those were what I just read you. The variance can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good, and that's the effect on the surrounding properties, and with the majority of the surrounding properties being the 30,000 square foot single-family residential detached dwellings. This will fit in well with that. The variance will not impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance, and my testimony is that it's compliant with the zone plan and zoning ordinance, and the benefits substantially outweigh the detriments. The benefits are the goals that I mentioned from the master plan, providing the housing opportunities, and the municipal land use law that I read. If we look at again, Dave's report said it's a permitted use. His indication is that we need variances for the lots. I gave the testimony for that. He had a recommendation that we reconfigure the lots to make some of them bigger. It's my opinion that that's not necessary and that the 30,000 square foot lots make sense. The same comment with respect to the width, and again, it's my testimony that in an R40 20C, lots that are more than compliant with the R20 zoning regulations are appropriate. Item 4 in his report is respect to off-street parking. We are not requesting any relief. These will all be beautiful custom homes. When they go for a plot plan, they will comply with all the setback requirements and all the parking requirements. Under design waivers, with respect to the street trees, we'll provide street trees during resolution compliance if the board approves the application to satisfy the board engineer that we're providing appropriate street trees. Continuing on the report, there's an indication that we would need in item 4 under review comments, we would need to get a letter of interpretation. If the board acts favorably on the application during resolution compliance, we will satisfy the board's engineer that there are no environmental problems to whatever degree is required. Item 5 in the report suggests putting curbing in front of lot 3.02, which is not part of the subdivision. If the board feels that's appropriate, we're not adverse to doing that. We felt that leaving the curbing off provided flexibility for the owner of lot 3.02, but it's not a major issue. If the board feels curbing is needed, we'll do the curbing. We proposed it without the curbing. Item 11 asks if there will be a homeowner association, and the answer is no homeowner association is proposed. The drainage would be handled the way it's always handled in Lakewood on residential single-family lot subdivisions, that any of the on-street drainage would be taken care of, maintained by DPW, and we need DPW approval, which we would get as part of resolution compliance. The off-street stuff, there would be easements to the homeowners, and the impacted homeowners would be responsible for the maintenance of those. Item 12 indicates we need to provide refuse and recycling storage locations. These are beautiful single-family homes. They'll keep their trash cans in the rear of the house, the same as I do. If they feel like putting in a pad, they'll put in a pad or enclosure. There's no ordinance requirement for any of that. So at plot plan, that would all be provided. Item 13 is with respect to basements, and they would anticipate basements similar to every other basement in Lakewood, and at time of plot plan, they would provide the details that they're complying with the ordinance with respect to basements. Item 14 with parking, I've already discussed. At plot plan, we would indicate and prove that we're fully compliant. The other comments in the report, we would address and satisfy the board engineer if the board acts favorably on the application.
Okay.
That's my testimony, Mr.
Thank you. Any board members have any questions of Mr. Flannery? Okay. Mr. Gazarovski, are you here in this application? Mr. Gazarovski, you may be muted. We don't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you.
Are you here in this application?
Yes, I am.
Okay, how are you, Mr. Gazarovski?
I'm fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, please proceed.
Mr.
Flannery?
I know, Mr. Flannery. You know, Mr. Chairman, I didn't receive, I'm not saying I didn't receive, but I did not see a copy of the revised review letter by the engineer, but in listening to Mr. Magno read it, I think he called out a number of variants that were necessary based upon this being in the R40 zone. Am I correct in saying that?
Mr. Gazarovski, Ali just put it up on the screen. Can you see it?
Fine.
So we have all the zoning variances on the screen right now.
Okay.
All the board members can see it too.
And I think they're basically similar to what was previously noticed by the earlier review letter. So I'm ready to start my examination of Mr. Flannery. But before I do that, I would like the board to take note of and enter into the record a letter which I sent to Mr. Jackson, to the chairman, to Ms. Morris, as well as to Mr. Pfeffer. My argument being that because this is a different application, that the applicant should have been held to renotice setting forth the relief which he is seeking, because as we know, we're coming from 6 lots down to 5 lots. And I understand that's kind of an issue which is up in the air.
Mr. Gazarovski, your letter is put on the record.
Thank you.
Okay.
And the record should reflect, I've had an opportunity to review that letter. and I've discussed with Mr. Gazarovski. In my view, if it were the other way around, it would make a difference. To go from 5 to 6 would be a problem, but to go from 6 to 5, I think that fairly apprises the public and the neighbors of the nature of the application, and that there's a subdivision, and whether there's 6 lots or 5 lots, I don't think has a material difference.
Okay.
In terms of
That's your opinion. I don't agree with you, but I respect your opinion. But I'm ready to proceed forward with examining Mr. Flannery.
Okay,
Sure, go ahead.
please go ahead.
Good evening, Mr.
Am I allowed to get on the record here?
Good evening.
I can't see you. Are you on?
I'm
Okay.
here.
You're hidden over there in the corner. Mr. Flannery, as I've read the application, I've read the notice, and of course I submitted my letter. I recognize that you don't agree with it, but my first question would be, in looking at the plan itself, it appears to me that except for the fact that you have reconfigured lots 5 and 6 to basically take those 2 lots and combine them into one oversized lot. Is that a correct statement?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you recognize, of course, also that one of the earlier issues was that if, in fact, there were 6 lots, this matter would have to go before the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
I understand there was an issue relating to that, yes, which is
Okay.
now
Would you agree?
a moot point.
But would you agree with me that if, in fact, there were 6 lots, as was initially shown in the initial application, that this matter would properly be before the Zoning Board rather than the Planning Board?
Well, there may be some discussion on that, and again, I think it's a moot point, and no need to waste the board's time.
Well, I appreciate
Excuse
you.
me, am I allowed to get invited into this conversation, please?
Who are you?
My name is Morris Weinberg, okay? I'm Mr. Gazarovski is
Mr. Warren, this is Mr. Gazarovski. Hold on. Mr. Weinberg, you have an attorney speaking right now. Let him speak. If he calls you as a witness.
I just want to get a chance. I just.
One second. You cannot talk. You have to be affirmed or sworn in. You cannot talk. Your attorney is speaking right now. Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Weinberg, you're interrupting the proceedings. I'm going to ask that he be muted until he be called upon. If you need to communicate with your attorney, call him or speak with him, but your attorney will represent you. And
let me represent the board. I will later call Mr. Weinberg as a witness, so he'll have an opportunity.
You can do that when you get to that point, when you're done with cross-examining Mr. Flannery. And to the point of the last comment, Mr. Flannery, whether it would make a difference, whether that would be a variance, I think that's a legal argument, and that is what it is. It will be determined by a court if it goes to that, and that's not the circumstance now. So I don't think it's productive to delve into that much more detail than you really do. You can make comment on it as it's appropriate.
Okay, Mr. Gazarovski, please proceed.
Right, Chair. Mr. Flannery, in looking at the 2 plans that were submitted, the subdivision plans, am I correct in saying that the plans for this project, the second plan is identical to the first plan with regard to 4 of the 5 lots, and the only change is the combining of lots 5 and 6 into 1 lot?
That is correct.
Okay. Would you also agree with me that the proposed new lot 5 is significantly larger than any of the other individual lots, being basically twice the size?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And you recognize, of course, that this reduction in lot size was made to properly keep this matter before the planning board.
That relates back to your first question, which is, we've indicated is a moot point that doesn't need to be discussed.
Okay, well, let me ask this question. Is it your representation, as well as the representation of the applicants, that in no time in the future will they come back before this board in an attempt to subdivide lot 5 into 2 lots? And is your client prepared to place a deed restriction on the plan to affirm that?
My opinion is this is virtually a by right application, and there would be no reason for us to make any of those concessions, especially a deed restriction that lasts forever.
So basically, your answer is you're not prepared to make that representation.
Correct.
Okay. Now, in looking at the remaining 4 lots, in listening to your testimony, it appeared to me that you were equating the size of these proposed lots to conform with the requirements as would be set forth in the cluster zone, correct?
This property has been referred to as being in the R40. It's not in the R40. It's clearly in the R40/20C residential cluster. That's the zone the property is in.
Let me ask you this question then. Are you familiar with the notice that was published by the applicant?
I did not see the notice, no.
Okay, but I ask, if you would, Mr. Chairman, that notice as published be placed on the screen so Mr. Flannery and I can go through it.
Ali, do you have that notice that you could provide the board with it? Let's give Ali a minute.
Okay, now in looking at that notice, the notice goes on to say that the subject site is in the R-40/2 cluster. Now, despite having said that, that is actually the generic name of the ordinance itself, is it not?
I don't know what you mean by the generic name of the ordinance.
Well, that's what the ordinance is called. It's called the R-40/20C. And if you satisfy certain requirements, you're entitled to the benefit of the cluster zone.
It's called the R40/20C, and there's no place in the ordinance where it details the R40/20C requirements.
Okay, now, in this notice, though, the only variances you are seeking as to those lots, you're seeking relief from compliance with what you admit to be the requirements of the R40 zone. For example, you say seeking relief for the following variances: minimum lot area. Variances are required as 5 of the 6 new lots with lot areas ranging from 30,000 square feet to 32,061 square feet are proposed, where 40,000 square feet are required.
I just want to place my objection on the record. Mr. Gazarovski, just give me 1 second. I'm just objecting in the sense that these were variances that we've noticed for as abundance of caution. Mr. Flannery has given testimony as to why that is not correct, that we don't need these variances. However, as abundance of caution, we've given both the notice as well as the legal justification to grant those variances should the board feel that we do need them. And as far as the R40/20C, that's the name of the zoning district.
May I proceed? May I proceed, please?
Yeah.
Now, you will further go on to say that the minimum lot width for 3 of the 7 lots around the culture.
There was an objection to this, and you know,
What's the objection? I'm reading from the notice which he sent to the public. Now,
if you want to just read from the notice is one thing, but you're adding words into my notice and asking Mr. Flannery questions.
Okay,
one at a time, please. One at a time, Mr. Gazarovski.
Respectfully, Mr. Pepper, basically in your introductory remarks, you were basically testifying rather than just simply referring to the document. But if I may go forward, you also say in the notice that minimum lot width for 3 of the 7 lots around the cul-de-sac is requested for lot widths between 100 feet and 129 feet or proposed where 150 feet is required. Now, is anything in this notice which should apprise the public of the fact that you are not seeking those variances now because you're attempting to apply a different standard? The public wasn't made aware of that, and you've come up with this argument now to try to get around the fact that you have a defective notice.
Hold on a second. That question is completely improper. It's six different parts. It's part testimony. It's part statement. It also started with the premise Your notice says, Mr. Flannery said that was not his notice. The applicant's counsel prepared the notice. He explained that it was out of an abundance of caution. So I don't think it's fair to pose the question to the witness in that manner. If you have a question for Mr. Flannery about his testimony or something you want to cross-examine him on, that's fine. Keep it to one part at a time.
Why can't I question him as to what the notice says? He's here to testify that that's the relief he's seeking, the only relief he's seeking, and that's what he's told the public.
I did not say you can't question him about the notice. I said you can't do it in several different parts. With your testimony interjected, your own comment in the middle of the question, and with the premise that it's Mr. Flannery's notice because it wasn't his notice.
It is his notice. He is the applicant's expert. Now,
well, you and I disagree on that. He said he hadn't seen it, so he just put it on the screen.
Pardon me?
He said he had not seen the notice until you just put it on the screen.
Oh, okay, fine. So you've come to this hearing this evening. You're aware of the application.
I don't think Mr. Flannery is an attorney that he has to see the notice.
Pardon me?
Yeah, I know. That's why go ahead. You could ask him questions about the notice, but don't put false premises into the question.
Well, explain for me, please, if you would, what the false premise is that I put forward.
You said you started your whole question out with your notice says. Mr. Flannery said he didn't say it was his notice. He says he hadn't looked at it. You just put it on the board. It's something Mr. Pfeffer prepared as the attorney for the applicant. He explained it was alternative relief. That's got nothing to do with the planner's job. The planner.
Where in this notice is there any reference to alternative relief?
Mr. Pfeffer explained that during his objection. If you have questions for Mr. Flannery, ask Mr. Flannery the questions. And don't, and the premise is that you started it with was that it was his notice. And he said that he hadn't seen it till you put it up.
Mr. Jackson, respectfully, it's the notice of the applicant. It's the notice that was published by the attorney for the applicant. Mr. Flannery now, for the first time, is coming up with an opinion which is completely contrary to what the applicant has noticed.
If you have questions for Mr. Flannery, ask it to him in one question at a time, and keep the statements out of the question.
Okay. Now, Mr. Flannery, we've covered lot number 5, and your testimony was you're not prepared to make any representations with the use of lot 5, correct?
Lot 5 is being subdivided to be used in accordance with the requirements of the R40/20C zone.
That's fine. Now, are we now assuming that with regard to this notice, it's your position as I guess you're the planner. You're the planner. I don't know whether you prepared the plot plan itself. You've testified that it's identical to the first one. Are you testifying that none of these requirements, as were called out in the initial review letter, as well as the second review letter, that variances are not necessary for the applicant to get relief from the requirements of the R40 zone? Is that your testimony?
My testimony, I thought, was rather clear that the ordinance is not clear on this, and that my opinion as a professional planner is that we don't need relief, but out of an abundance of caution, where I provided testimony for the board to grant those variances that are listed in the RVE letter. I provided the reasoning with both the municipal land use law and the master plan of why they should be needed, even though it's my opinion that they shouldn't be needed. And we've both done this for a long time, Mr. Gazarovski, and it's better
much
to
older
be
than I am,
careful
so
and
you've done it
ask
longer
for
than-
more.
Okay. We know for a fact that the notice which was published in a newspaper to give notice to the public had no reference whatever to the applicant satisfying the requirements of the cluster zone requirements, correct?
The notice that was provided was so adjacent property owners would understand the scope of the application that's submitted.
Okay.
And my testimony is consistent with that. We are asking for the variances that were listed in the RVE report and were listed in the notice.
Okay, now, fine. That's fine. Now, would you agree with me that if you're attempting to do that, that if in fact you were to expand the size of lots 1, 2, 3, and 4 you could make them compliant, but that obviously would diminish the size of what you presently put forth as lot number 5.
That's two questions. Certainly, if we made them larger, it would diminish the lot 5. We cannot make them comply with the R40 zone, but we're not in the R40 zone. We're in the R40/20C zone.
Can you, in fact, widen these lots, the variances you were seeking? Can you increase the size of those lots to either satisfy or come much closer to satisfy the requirements of the relief you are seeking?
We could do many different variations of what could be done. That could be more or less compliant with the R40 zone on certain lots, but my professional opinion is that the plan as submitted is the appropriate subdivision of the subject property.
Okay. Would you agree with me that if in fact those lots 1 through 4 were increased in size, that would make the impossibility for lot 5 in the future to be subdivided into 2 lots?
I would not say anything is impossible in the future.
Okay. I have no further questions, Mr. Flannery.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Guy, you wanted to bring Mr. Weinberg as a witness?
I'm sorry, Mr. Hurd, are you addressing me?
Yes, you said you want to bring Mr. Weinberg as a witness. I don't know if that's appropriate if he has an attorney.
As the applicant concluded, I have one more question of Mr. Flannery, if I may. Mr. Flannery, in looking at the site plan, you're aware of the fact, or I'm making you aware of the fact that my client owns a lot which is immediately adjacent to the cul-de-sac.
Yes, that is correct.
Would you also agree that if in fact this plan is approved, because that would change the adjacent property from a lot which is solely facing on Spruce Street to be a corner lot?
That is correct.
And if you were to do this, would that not also necessarily increase the required setback on that cul-de-sac street for my client from 20 feet to change it into the required, I believe, 50 feet, making it for lot frontage, because now he would have frontage on his proposed cul-de-sac?
In Lakewood, what they've done before in circumstances.
I don't care what they've done. I'm asking you a question.
He's answering the question.
One at a time.
Without answering, my question is, are you not changing my client's property to require a front yard setback on the cul-de-sac street? Yes or no?
If it's approved as indicated, it would put a front yard setback on your client's property.
Is any of that included in your notice?
The notice indicated what the subdivision was. I've never seen detail like that included in a notice in all the years I've been reviewing.
Especially in the sense that your client's lot is not part of this application. However, I'm going to ask Brian one other question. Brian, is there anything that we could do to alleviate that item occurring?
Yes, there is.
You haven't done that, have you, Mr. Pepper?
One at a time. Brian, answer the question, please.
You haven't done that, have you?
Mr. Pfeffer asked me a question which I'm going to answer now. And the answer to that question is in prior applications in Lakewood where a neighbor complained of that circumstance, what the board has done is provided a strip of property that in this case would be connected to lot 5, a 4-foot wide strip of property, reduce the right-of-way width to 46 feet, provide a strip of property connected to lot 5 of 4 feet in width with a sidewalk easement on it. That then becomes the property of lot 5, which lot 5 would maintain, and there is then not a front yard setback on the adjoining lot.
It's not in your notice, is it?
Brian, we have done that before already.
Yes.
In other townships as well.
Right. Now, I know this board has done that.
I have no further questions of this witness.
Okay, thank you. Any board members have any questions Mr. Flannery, Mr. Gazarovski. Okay, we will open up to the public.
Wait a second. I apologize, Mr. Chairman. You are correct. But I want to know if the applicant has concluded his case.
We have no other testimony.
Okay, I would open to the public, and Mr. Weinberg will have a chance to speak. If he has something to add, not what you have tested.
Well, they should be questions that are directed by Mr. Gazarovski. You know, we can't have him testify again and make legal argument when his attorney's job is to do that. It's a duplication. If Mr. Gazarovski has questions for him, that's interesting.
Okay, so I would open it to the public, please, one at a time. And the first one will give Mr. Weinberg to speak.
Yes.
Mr. Weinberg, are you here? Are you there?
I am here, yes.
Okay, you have to be affirmed by the attorney.
Okay.
Weinberg, do you swear affirm testimony you'll give before this board with the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And Mr. Gazarovski, what questions do you have for him?
Please state your name for the record.
Morris Weinberg.
And where do you live?
Mr. Jackson.
34 Sherry Court.
Okay, please proceed. Mr. Gazarovski, you can question.
Mr. Chairman, respectfully, it's my intention to call Mr. Weinberg as my witness as the appropriate time, which would be when I am presenting my case, not just with regard to public comment.
Yeah, that's fine. You hear that, Mr. Herschel? He wants to call as a witness after, I guess you have other witnesses, Mr. Gazarovski?
I do, yes, I do.
Okay, so Mr. Herzl, why don't we,
I'm not opening to the public then, if Mr. Gazarovski has more witnesses. Let's finish, the applicant finish his case, let Mr. Gazarovski finish his case, then I'll open up to the public. Is that not right?
Yeah, that makes sense, because a lot of what he covers might be covered, the public might have questions about it too, so who's your?
Okay.
Who's your first?
Mr. Gazarovski, who's your other witnesses that you have?
I'm calling as my expert witness, Mr. Gordon Gemma.
Okay.
I see him here.
Yeah, he should be here, and Mr. Jackson.
Yeah, I saw him on there, and Mr. Herzl, you know, this is difficult as an attorney in the position Mr. Gazarovski is in, because you're not in the room, you can't talk to your client, you can't talk to your witnesses. You kind of have to use telepathic powers to figure out what you're doing next. So, Mr. Gazarovski, I appreciate your patience. And with that said, if we could ask Mr. Gemma to raise his right hand, and do you swear testimony will give before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr. Gemma, we saw him before. Let's see here.
Yes,
I
I'm
know
here.
Mr. Gemma's a planner and attorney, but Mr. Gazarovski would have to offer him and offer will qualificate what.
Okay, I see Mr. Gemma.
Yes, I'm here, Mr. Chairman.
You have appeared before this board already before.
Yes, sir, I have.
Okay, we'll accept you.
And that's as a.
Okay, you have any questions?
Gemma,
Yes, we'll accept Mr. Gemma.
Thank you.
planner?
As a planner tonight, yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Gazarovski, that's why you're calling Mr. Gemma as your planner?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The board has accepted him as an expert in that field. Please proceed.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Jackson, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gemma, you were retained by me with regard to presenting testimony in this matter. Were you not?
That is correct.
1 second, Mr. Gazarovski. Ali, can you please mute anybody else from the audience besides Mr. Gemma? Okay, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah. Now please proceed, Mr. Gazarovski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have been accepted as an expert to give testimony before this board, not only this evening, but many times in the past, have you not?
That is correct.
Have you also testified as professional planner before other municipalities as well as before courts of law?
The past 35 years, probably hundreds of boards and before the superior courts in the state of New Jersey.
Thank you. Now, with regard to this particular action, prior to this evening, did I email to you the copies of the notices, the site plans, the subdivision plans relative to this particular application?
Yes, sir.
Because you'll have the opportunity to examine the Lakewood ordinances as applies to this, as well as the recently adopted master plan.
Yes, I did.
And what zone is this property presently in?
As indicated, it's in the R40-20C Residential Cluster Zone District.
Okay. Now, you were present when the board engineer read his review letter, which was also placed on the screen, were you not?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you listened to the testimony of Mr. Flaherty, and you read the notices and listened to the comments of the board engineer. Do you agree with those variances which are called out in the notice, as well as is called out in the review letter of the township engineer?
I agree that, yes, I agree that for four out of the 5 of the lots, variances are required as for lot size. And as has been discussed, the last lot is 75,000 square feet. Until 2 weeks ago, that was proposed to be divided into 2 lots. Now it's at 75,000 square feet. In addition to the lot variances, 3 of the lots also require variance relief for minimum lot width of between 100 and 129 feet, where 150 is required.
Okay. Now, you've also listened to Mr. Flannery's testimony dealing with his opining as to the issue with regard to whether or not this project would qualify as a cluster. Did you not?
That is correct. Yes, I did.
Would you please put forth your opinion as to why it is your opinion as a planner that this site does not qualify as a cluster?
There are a few very basic reasons. And one, Section 18-904 is entitled Cluster Single Family Residential Development. That's the section of the ordinance that talks about what qualifies for a cluster. And Section 18-904C in subsection 1 says that in order to qualify for a cluster, quote, the minimum lot tract area shall be 15 acres. This lot is about 5 acres. It doesn't meet the requirements per your ordinance. 2, more to the point is subsection B, that the intent of a cluster zone, the intent is to, quote, preserve desirable open space, conservation areas, floodplains, recreation and park areas, and lands for other public purposes by permitting the reduction of lot size, period, end quote. There is nothing about this project that in any way meets those intended purposes. This is a single family development intended as a single family development with houses along a cul-de-sac. So it doesn't meet the intent of your ordinance. To try to make that comparison is not appropriate. And to suggest that lot sizes can derivate between 20,000 and 40,000 square feet without any indication of the intent of having desirable open space, conservation areas, and lands for the public purposes bastardizes your ordinance. That's not what it says. It's not its intent. There's one other point I want to make about the master plan, and that is on pages 17 and 18. It indicates that the purposes of the R40/20 cluster is for, quote, planned affordable residential developments. Clearly, this is not proposed as a part of this application. It doesn't meet the ordinance definition, doesn't meet the ordinance requirement, doesn't meet the master plan basis for a cluster. So to make the argument that Brian's trying to make, and I give him credit for being clever, but it's just not accurate pursuant to your own ordinances and your master plan. I want to make one other point about this. And we're not talking about density, same density. We're talking about lot size and whether the lot size is appropriate. It's not. And let me just go, if I can, Ron, to the issue of the ordinances and the master plan. There's a few other things I think that's important for this board to take into consideration. And that is section 18-102, as well as section 18-900, indicates that the bulk and other standards in your ordinances are, quote, minimum requirements, end quote, for the promotion of public health, safety, comfort, convenience, and general welfare of the residents of Lakewood. You can't just pretend to then change ordinance requirements and the bulk standards to meet some definition of cluster that doesn't fit, doesn't make it. And there's one other thing I want to point out, and that is page 8 of the master plan, land use strategy, number 10. It states that one of the land use strategies in Lakewood is to, quote, strictly enforce bulk and yard zoning standards of the Unified Development Ordinance to prevent overbuilding of individual sites. And for me as a planner, what this means is that both your ordinance and your master plan say it's important to read as drafted and apply the bulk standards as drafted. To make the argument that Brian tries to make later on and saying, well, there's a lot of other properties here that are smaller, 30,000 square foot. That may be a wonderful argument for a zone change, but it's not an argument for a bulk variance relief. You clearly need bulk variance relief. Your engineer is right on point. Standards of the R40 zone apply, and they apply because you don't meet the basic clear criteria of what a cluster zone is, and you sure don't meet the purposes of what you say a cluster zone should be. So for those reasons, you have to apply the C1 and C2 standards.
And now, talking about variance relief, go into the variance that the applicant is seeking, and how can variance relief be granted if, in fact, we were treating this as was originally noticed in the original application?
If you treated this as originally noticed, as the applicant seemed to concede in its notice, it was needed. As the board knows, there are two standards for a C variance. The first is the C1 standard, that due to the lot's unique shape or topographic conditions, or the result of pre-existing structures, the strict application of the ordinance would result in an undue hardship. The second is the flexible C, and that is where the purposes of the land use law are advanced by a deviation of the ordinance requirement, and the benefits of that deviation have to substantially outweigh any detriments. So let's look at this. Second, the first one is your lot width. And as to lot width, the issue here is the lot width itself is not necessarily warranted by the shape of the cul-de-sac because there's more than enough room to comply. Your engineer is 100% correct. If, in fact, it made the lots wider, they would comply with the standards. The only reason that, in fact, they're not wider is because the applicant doesn't want to do that. It's not the unique shape of the property. They would cure all of this. This is a self-created hardship by the applicant, and it seems kind of evident. The real reason they want to do that is at some point to go back and subdivide lot 5 into 2 other lots, two-stepping the issue of density. So you can't say right now that this is anything other than a self-created hardship as to why it's warranted under the C1 standard. As to the C2 standards, there are no purposes of the land use law being advanced by the proposed relief, let alone substantially outweighing any detriments, based upon the clear language in both the ordinance as to minimum standards, as well as the master plan suggesting strict compliance with the ordinance. There is a substantial detriment to the intent and purpose of your zone plan, and that's what your language says. As for impacting the public good in connection with single-family development, along with the visual impacts of having reduced width, the intent is to also reduce the impacts of noise, light, air to the neighbors on either side. When you have smaller widths otherwise required, you have those impacts. There is no benefit. There are detriments. And so you can't make the argument as a planner that, in fact, the benefits outweigh the detriments. Brian was forced to try to make the argument that don't worry about the bulk standard. They don't apply. It's a cluster. Problem is he has your ordinance doesn't say that, but the reality is these are all self-created. And the same thing applies as to the lot area side. You may not be able to cure all the lot areas by making them larger as suggested by your engineer, but you can get them a whole lot closer. Essentially, if you just evenly applied it, you have an additional 35,000 square feet of excess property on the oversized lot. Each property could get then, of those four, 8,750 square feet more, putting them very close to your 40,000 square foot standard. That is your standard in this zone. And this zone, even though it's a R40, R20 cluster, doesn't say that you can then go down to R40. Only way you could do it is if it's more than 15 acres, and if in fact you met the purpose of cluster. It doesn't do that, and it's not more than 15 acres. So therefore, you try to comply as best you can. Again, the only reason that this is being done now is so an applicant can come back later on and say, I want to split that 75,000 square foot lot as I intended, as I wanted to do, until someone said, hey, the density is too great. And then 2 weeks ago, they changed. So the reality of the world is you have an ordinance. It makes it clear what complies with the cluster, what doesn't comply. This doesn't comply. You have standards, and you have to apply your standards. And simply saying that making lots that are approximately 75% smaller, I could in fact make the same size, doesn't make any sense. It doesn't advance any intent and purpose of zoning. It doesn't advance, and it does detrimentally in the zone plan. And to make the argument, well, there are a lot of other ones in this area.
Could you just, in layman's language, give to the board what is intended when we use this term, self-created hardship?
Self-created hardship is, another way of looking at it is, a hardship normally is the lot has wetlands, the lot has steep slopes, the lot has buildings on it that make it hard to comply. This lot is irregularly shaped. This lot is irregularly shaped. But the variances that the applicant are seeking for lot width and lot size have nothing to do with that irregular shape. That's everything to do with the applicant's desire to keep a 75,000 square foot lot that they could subdivide later on. That is a self-created hardship.
Okay, please make your conclusionary remarks and your professional opinion as to what, in fact, the applicant has failed to establish and prove.
First, the applicant has failed to establish and meets any of the requirements, either intent or lot size for cluster. Therefore, you can't apply the cluster standards as suggested. Second, looking at what is applied and what was noticed, the applicant doesn't meet the C1 standard for either width or lot area, and doesn't meet the C1 and C2 standard for, doesn't meet the C2 standard for either lot width or lot area. It does have a substantial detrimental impact. And you can't say that, well, there are a lot of other lots in this area at 30,000 square feet. Great argument for a rezoning, but the one other thing I bring up, when you look at the R30, R40, and R20 zone in your master plan, it talks about what it's about. It doesn't suggest in 2017, you should change it. It says keep it. So somehow to make the argument that this should be changed or should have the R30 doesn't comply with the basic language of proposed uses in your master plan itself. Therefore, it doesn't meet any of the requirements for a C1 or C2 variance.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may. Dave.
Dave who?
Maggie, if I may.
Yes.
And if Ally could pull up sheet number 4 of our report again for the board. As Mr. Gemma pointed out, and I want to point out in comment 1 of our zoning, we do have the sentence in there. The site has been designed to the R40 standards since the tract does not meet the minimum project size for cluster developments. He mentioned that in his testimony of 15 acres required. And that's why we looked at this as 40,000 square feet for minimum lot area and 150 feet for minimum lot width. I would like to make one correction also. The revised plan only has lot width variances required for lots 3 and 4 now, where previously it needed an additional lot before Lot 5 was made larger into the 75,000 square feet.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Pfeffer,
Yes, just a couple of quick questions for Mr. Gemma.
do you want to answer, or Brian is going to answer?
Two things. One, I will have a couple of questions for quick cross-examination of Mr. Gemma, and then I do have a couple of questions for Brian on cross-examination.
Okay.
I'm sorry, on a redirect. I apologize.
Okay, so Mr. Pfeffer, please proceed.
Good evening, Mr. Gemma. How are you?
I'm well, sir. Yourself?
Very good. Are you aware how many lots in the area meet the 40,000 square foot requirement?
Objection. Objection. It's irrelevant.
Yeah, no.
I didn't hear the answer.
Mr. Herzl said it's not irrelevant.
It's not irrelevant. We always consider the whole area.
Right, and the answer.
That's my point, Mr. Herzl.
Right.
They're indicating that 30,000 square foot lots, they're objecting to the creation of these lots as not meeting the code. But my point is that there are very few lots in this zone that meet the 40,000 square foot requirement. I'm just wondering if Mr. Gemma has taken a look at the surrounding areas.
And the answer is, again, I don't know how many lots exactly in the area meet the 40,000 square foot requirement. But as I indicated in my testimony, the argument that somehow all the lots are smaller than zoned as a reason for variance relief is not relevant. That's an argument for rezoning, not an argument for variance relief.
Okay.
And are you aware of any 15-acre tracts in this R4020C district?
I'm not.
Objection once again. It's totally irrelevant.
Based upon the chairman's comment, I think it's very relevant. And I'm so if Mr. Gemma knows the answer, great. If he doesn't,
What do you think? Do you want to
yes, I want to have the answer.
Please proceed. Answer the question.
Mr. Jackson, in every area, we always look on the whole surrounding. We always used to call it.
I think it's relevant. It goes to the negative criteria and the detrimental that it has on the surrounding neighborhood, the zone plan.
Well, if I may, as I indicated, I am not aware as to whether in the R40 and R20 zone, whether there are properties that are 15 acres that would meet the intent, that meet the clear language of the requirement for use of clusters. However, as I indicated before, that's a great argument to change the zoning, not an argument for variance relief.
Okay, Mr. Jackson, we always ask for the Procel map. You know, we used to ask for that same reason, to know what's the surrounding area and what fits in.
You could draw. Mr. Gemma has given his opinion. The board could use his experience, and you've determined that it's relevant. Now you have the answer in the record. He doesn't know.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Pfeffer, please continue.
Yes. Do you know what size is your client's property?
I'd have to look at the map to get the size.
All right. Well,
I don't know.
take a minute. Do you have that map?
I'd have to.
Let's put the map up.
1 second, and I'll.
Just for the record, my client's property is that loan is like can I see it clearly again, please? 3.02 and 3.01.
Isn't that property shown very well on the subdivision map? Because
I think it is. It is. That was the issue we raised.
Let's take a look at the subdivision map.
Thank you.
We just added up. It's right there.
There you go.
It's roughly 125 by 200.
So it's 25,000 square foot lot?
It is as shown.
There they are.
It's not part of the application, so this isn't going to have dimensions on this,
Right.
which is why I was showing the tax map.
If you go back,
Knows more than I do, so go back to that, Ally.
There's a tax, yeah.
Do you know what the area of those lots are? Can you make that representation? There's a link with on the.
Okay, it's very clear. One is 100 by 322, and one is 125 by 201.
So if we have some math whizzes,
I have a calculator right here.
I don't fall into that
125 times 201 is
There's
25,125.
125. And the other one is 100 by 322, so that's 32,000 and change. So roughly, to answer your question, sir, it would be around 57,125 feet, give or take.
If you combine the two lots.
Yeah, the two separate
Yes, sir.
lots.
So one lot is a little more than 25 and one's a little more than 32,000, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So one of them is smaller than the lots that this applicant is proposing, and one is about the same size, a little bit bigger than a few of them, but basically right in the middle of what our average lot size are, is that correct?
These sizes speak for themselves, yes.
No problem. I have no further questions of Mr. Gemma. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you want me at this time to redirect Mr. Flannery, or we could wait for a later point to address any comments he may have against Mr. Gemma, in opposition to Mr. Gemma's testimony.
Okay. Mr. Gazarovski, do you have any other witnesses?
I didn't hear the last comment being made with regard to what Mr. Pepper said.
I was just indicating.
Have Mr. Flannery respond.
Okay, I notice that is the conclusion of my professional testimony. I know that my client, Mr. Weinberg, is present, and if he wants to come back on, I have several questions for him.
I have a couple questions for Mr. Gemma.
You do, Mr.
Yeah, if that's all right, Mr. Herzl. Can I ask Mr. Gemma?
Yeah, it's okay. And right afterwards, I will allow Mr. Weinberg, not as a public comment, but as a witness. That's before the public comment. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Jackson, please go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Gemma, is there anything that would prohibit undersized lots? Outside of the, I don't think the applicant's seeking a cluster development.
Wait a second, that's not his testimony. He's seeking the cluster standards.
Well, he compared it to the cluster standards. I don't think he's seeking a cluster subdivision.
Right, it's only 5 houses.
Yeah, he compared it. But my
So
question
then as you apply the standards of the R40 zone.
is there anything that prohibits an applicant from seeking undersized lots?
Is there anything in the ordinance that prohibits an applicant from seeking a variance?
Right.
Is that your question, John?
Yes.
So for the lot, so just so we're clear, your question is, since a lot that's undersized requires a variance, question to me, is there anything in the ordinance that prohibits anyone from seeking variance relief? And the answer is no.
All right. Are there any cases that stand for the proposition that when you go down a couple of zones with the size of your lot, that is,
would you ask that again, please? I don't understand.
Are there any cases that stand for the proposition that when you make a lot substantially undersized, that what you're really doing is seeking a density variance?
When you make a number of lots substantially undersized within the zone, and you actually increase what was otherwise permitted, then in fact, you would be, in my opinion, seeking a density variance. If I seek, as an example, if I have 5 acres and I am in an R40 zone and I am seeking 6 lots, then therefore I'm increasing the density by 1 otherwise permitted. Is that your question?
I have nothing further.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gazarovski, you have is Mr. Weinberg online that you would like to question?
I'm assuming he is.
Mr. 1 second, please. Ali, could you please unmute if you know which one is Mr. Weinberg? I saw him towards the end.
Do you hear me? I'm here.
Is it? Okay.
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah, Mr. Weinberg, you have to be affirmed. It has to be affirmed by Mr. Jackson, no?
And Mr. Weinberg, do you have your camera on? It helps, I think, when the board can see.
I don't have it on, sorry.
You had it on.
I never had the camera on. No, I didn't have the camera on. I'm sorry. I've been called in just a regular line the whole time.
Okay.
Okay.
You swear affirm testimony given before this board be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Mr. Weinberg, I have several questions to ask you. Were you present online throughout this entire hearing?
I was on the phone. That's what you
Okay.
mean on the line? Yes.
Yes.
You listened to all of the testimony, both that of Mr. Flannery as well as that of Mr. Gemma, who has been retained by me as your planner, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now, with regard to when the subdivision map itself was placed on the screen, can we get that back up on the screen again? Okay, now, they're identified, I believe, as lot, did you hold it steady? I can't read the lot numbers there. Would you just enlarge that a bit,
Yeah,
please? You gotta bring it up a little bit.
I don't know which lot numbers you're trying to read.
The ones that face,
You're referring to
Mr. Weinberg. Yeah.
My lots are 842, lot 3.01 and 3.02.
okay. So you are in fact immediately adjacent to the subject property and immediately adjacent to this proposed cul-de-sac street. Correct?
That's correct.
And
That's
when you
correct.
initially retained me, the applicant was seeking approval for, was it 6 lots, I believe? Is that not correct?
That is correct.
And you
And
listened
actually,
to
I want to point out something because it hasn't been brought up till now. I don't know if it makes a difference, but if you look at the original notice, which is the one that we're working with right now, that notice itself was, sort of contradictory because if you look at it, at one point, the applicant referred to the 6 lots that they're getting. And then if you look at the last sentence again, it says minimum lot width of 3 of the 7 lots around the cul-de-sac. So, that original public notice, what it's supposed to be is to be able to give clarity to all the neighbors about what, the application is in itself was ambiguous at best because in one case it referred to 7 lots and another case it referred to 6 lots. And based on
Mr.
the way,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. Weinberg, you have a very capable attorney who's making that argument. What you're doing now is you're making a legal argument about the notice.
No,
I
I'm
think
not,
that's
I'm
something
bringing,
that
I'm
your
not,
attorney
I'm
can
not,
handle.
I'm sorry. I'm not making a legal argument. I'm bringing up a point, and I
Well,
believe
I
that
think
that
your
point.
attorney can handle that. If you have a comment factually or something, how this affects you, I don't want to have you make the legal argument and then have your attorney also make the legal argument.
And yeah, I want to get past the notice issue.
Okay, let me ask this.
Okay,
Let me try to bring Mr. Weinberg's testimony into focus. Mr. Weinberg, either you and or a member of your family are the owners of the 2 lots which we have referred to that are adjacent to the proposed cul-de-sac street, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you've heard testimony to the effect that if in fact that street were installed, that would convert the 1 lot, which is immediately adjacent to the proposed cul-de-sac street, that would increase the front yard setback required for your lot, correct?
Yes, it would.
Okay, now just state
And virtually make the lot like almost an unbuildable lot. But yeah.
Okay, but having said that, in your concluding remarks, tell us why you are objecting to this subdivision.
Well, again, obviously, I'm relying on your opinion and Mr. Gemma's opinion from from a legalese point of view, like Mr. Jackson said. But just from a practical layman's terms, again, I owned these 2 lots for many, many years before anyone else of all the neighbors who ever put in letters supporting this. And just to get back to a point, I want to bring this up. This is not illegal. This is a fact. Mr. Pfeffer had asked a question about how big my lots are, and he made a point to say that one is 25,000 and one is 30,000. Again, be advised that I bought these lots with those sizes. This wasn't 1 lot that was subdivided into 2 lots. So again, everyone keeps on bringing up the fact that all the lots on this block are all around 30,000 square feet. And the truth is that's not debatable. That's true. But all those lots and all those houses were built on lots that were themselves 30,000 square feet. They weren't 60,000 and split into two 30,000 square foot lots. They weren't 45,000 square foot lots that were split into 30. They were lots that were 30,000 square feet. The owner of the lot went in front of the board and said, listen, I have a lot. It's a hardship. It's not conforming. And they got their variances. What's being contemplated over here is totally something different. You have two lots over here. Each lot in its own is a beautiful conforming lot, larger than R40. So to compare it to lots that were built already and in its essence were hardship lots is a problem. And I want to bring up a bigger point over here again. I know you might say I'm going off on a tangent, but I really think it's important for the board to hear this. I really think it's important. And all the professionals that spoke tonight really touched on this issue, and this is the major issue over here. This zone of R40, forget about the cluster part, the R40 zone is basically in existence for 3 blocks on Spruce Street. From the cemetery till Vine Street is R40 zone. Every zone around there, back, front, side, and for that much for the rest of Lakewood is not R40. The problem that's happening over here is that, in essence, the township, by having this thing zoned as R40, we're not one. Again, you know, Mr. Pfeffer asked this question. There's not one conforming house or lot. I don't want to say lot. There are lots. There's not one conforming existing house that's conforming to an R40 zone. So again, the mere fact that we're talking about this is the problem. This is a zoning issue. It's not a planning issue. It's a zoning issue. There should be something done about this. And again, what's being done is just, it doesn't make sense. There is no R30. Again, who picked R30 as like the baseline for what the lots should be over here? There's no such a zone as R30 in Lakewood. Let's be real. It goes from R40 to R20. I mean, why don't we just say that the lots have to be 32,300? You know, the whole thing doesn't make sense. And again, there's an issue and there's an underlying issue, and I'm aware of it, and I think the planning board itself is aware of that issue, what's going on in that block. And the bottom line is, I made my best efforts to try to work this out. I didn't just pick up the phone and hire Ron Gazarovski because I wanted to just make trouble over here. Okay, I made my best efforts and spent a lot of time with these applicants, and the bottom line is their hands are tied by the other people that are involved over here, the other neighbors. And I just think that, you know, again, I'm sorry for that, you know, speech, but again, this affects my property, number one. Like Mr. Gazarovski said, I'm going from a side setback to a front setback, number one. Number two, I had 2 beautiful lots with beautiful tree lots behind me and beautiful tree lots to the side of me. I didn't contemplate, and I don't think it's fair, to just put a road right next to adjacent, that road that's going to lead into this potential cul-de-sac drives right by the side of that whole lot. Again, so you have a beautiful lot that potentially someone's going to put a beautiful house on, which right now has 3 lots to the side of it, which potentially would maybe have 1 house on it per the zoning. And now you're going to just plop down the street that you're going to have cars with basements. So you're talking potentially 12 houses of in and out cars going in. Again, for what reason? It doesn't conform with the zoning. It just doesn't conform with it. I mean, I don't understand it. And again, Mr. Gazarovski, go ahead. You could ask some more questions.
Well, I have no further questions of you, but the reason why you hired me and retained me was not because you were just looking to be a troublemaker. You were looking to protect your property, and you were only asking the applicant to conform with the zoning requirements as were set forth in the review letter of the township planner. It's as simple as that, isn't it?
That's it. Very simple.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Herzl, I have a question for Mr. Weinberg. And I'm not projecting whether I think the board should grant this application or whether I think they should not grant the application. But
Who is speaking? Who's speaking?
John
I'm
Jackson.
sorry, just who's speaking now? Okay,
This is
hi.
the board
Okay,
attorney,
sorry
John
about
Is
that.
it the board's attorney?
One of the
Okay,
things
go ahead.
that was proposed by the applicant was basically a strip of land that would run along parallel with your property or parallel with the street that would block access to the street from your lot. And they proposed.
I'm going to object to that question because that is not before the board. Mr. Jackson, you are the board's attorney. What is before the
All
board
right,
right
Mr.
now?
Gazarovski, I'll ask it to you. If the board has done that in the past, and I'm just, if they do that, I've seen that.
Proof before, wait, there's no proof before this board as
Can you
to
just
any
bear
other
with me for 1 minute,
subdivision.
Mr. Gazarovski?
Pardon me?
Just hear me out.
Mr. Gazarovski, let Mr. Jackson speak, please.
Hear me out. That a lot, that really is a block, and I've seen people for years with that kind of strip. It's almost like a spite strip, and it blocks access to the road. I mean, if I own that property, that's the last thing I would want there. So I just wanted to see if that was a solution. The applicant is saying, well, if you're worried about a double-fronted lot and you don't want to create a corner lot, we'll propose to put a strip along there that would effectively have a barrier between your client's lot and the street. Over the years, I've seen circumstances where when people have that, it stops them from developing their property further in the future. So I just want to know if think about whether that is something that.
And it's something we have done plenty times in the past.
Well, that may very well be, but Mr. Chairman, when you did that, that was part of the plan, that was part of the notice. And by the way, if you create that strip of land, how do you then satisfy any of the requirements with regard to lot depth and frontage and the like? I mean, and having said all of that, none of that is before this board. Let them introduce prior plans, let them introduce prior approvals, let them substantiate what they're saying. What is only before this board today
Well,
is the plan before you.
before the board because they brought it up in response to an objection, and I think the board could fashion that. I just want to say,
Well, again, I definitely,
think that through.
again, could I answer that, please? Again, I'm not 100% sure I understand what you're saying. And in order for me to understand it, I would need to see on a drawing, because again, like I said, the plans that are changing here, and they keep on changing, and I need to see something exactly on a piece of paper that I could go show to an expert, and they could review with me and tell me if my
enough information. I understand. I just wanted to bring that point up.
Mr. President, may I ask you this question? If they were to do that, would they then not need some form of relief with regard to the width of the road? And that's not been asked for in the application or the notice.
Exactly.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of questions on cross-examination of Mr. Weinberg.
Okay. Mr. Weinberg, are you still there?
I am here, Mr. Pfeffer.
Okay.
I'm all yours.
Thank you. In your answering to Mr. Gazarovski's questions, you indicated that there was no such thing as an R30 and that you should really try and comply with the ordinance as much as possible. Have you ever made an application for a subdivision on your property?
Objection.
Nope.
It's irrelevant.
No.
It is very relevant. I would like Mr. Weinberg to answer the question. Have you ever made an application?
He answered it.
What was his answer?
No.
He said no.
Again, what was his question?
Have you ever made an application for a subdivision on your property?
Oh, yes. So again, to clarify.
I don't think that's relevant. He can do whatever he wants. That has nothing to do.
So, Mr. Jackson, the reason I'll be very, very quick on this item, it is very relevant. The 50-some thousand square foot combined lot there was an application for a subdivision by Mr. Weinberg in 2006.
Yes,
before the, let me finish. Before this board.
Mr. Pfeffer,
Mr. question. Could I answer the question, please?
1 second.
Stop speaking until Mr. Pfeffer answers.
You're right. Mr. Pfeffer was talking. One at a time, please.
I would like to enter that Mr. Weinberg has made an application for the neighboring property that he's indicating there are approximately 32,000 and 25,000 square foot lots that were originally a 50,000 give or take square foot lot that was subdivided by this board back in 2006. Additionally, we have only seeking, let me finish. Mr. Weinberg's application including 6 different variances for those lots. They didn't meet any of the criteria that we're meeting, but now when this applicant is going for the same application, Mr. Weinberg all of a sudden says, we have to maintain what's there, and when it was good for him, it was good for him. But now that we're seeking the same application, and it's in the same area, it's the contiguous property. So I think it is very relevant.
But can
I
answer
agree.
the question with all due respect, Mr. Pfeffer? You know, if you're going to do your homework, then do your homework 100%. Now go back. What happened, Mr. Herzl? I'm going to remind everyone is that I purchased, and if Mr. Pfeffer did his homework, he would know that. I went ahead and purchased these 2 lots as 2 separate lots. They were separate lots. And it happened to be that at that point, this zoning wasn't R40, it was A1 zoning. What happened was I then went ahead and purchased as 2 separate lots. The mistake that I made was that I went ahead and purchased both the lots in my personal name, same ownership. Unbeknownst to me, there was some sort of law that I was not aware of, which said that if you buy 2 undersized lots and it's the same owner, the township, well, I don't even know which authority has a right to merge them into one. So again, what happened was I got sideswiped. I bought, like again, they were 2 separate lots. You can verify all this. I took a deed to 2 separate lots. And then what happened was I didn't realize about that law, and they went and merged it, and immediately I filed an application to basically split it back into 2. So again, I didn't take a lot that was 57,000 square feet and just randomly decide to split it into 2. So let's be fair, let's be clear.
Okay. This is why I don't like to have these kind of questions. I don't think that the fact that somebody got a variance years ago has any bearing on whether the merits there.
No, but Mr. Weinberg did testify that his lot.
I thought that wasn't you, Mr. Hurst.
Mr. Chair, I have to have found both of this question and answer very, very relevant.
All right, well, that's.
I also think so, because he testified.
I'll back off of that.
And Mr. Jackson, one at a time, please. The job of the planning board, that's, if not, we wouldn't have anything over here, to give variances when they see fit. If a neighborhood, I mean, the guy said, Mr. Weinberg said there's no 30,000 square foot. There isn't any 30,000 square foot. But if that's what fits into the neighborhood, then the person has a right to ask for variance. It's up to the board to decide, should we grant the variance or not?
Okay.
I'd like to also just answer the statement that was made. So yes, there is a doctrine of merger that applied. That after he bought, there were existing lots and they merged. There was now one 50,000 plus or minus square foot lot. Mr. Weinberg then shows that he wanted to now subdivide it back to. He made an application and he came back before this board. That's the bottom line.
Why is that relevant?
It is very relevant, but it is very relevant.
One at a time. One at a time, or something me too.
Excuse me, Mr. Herzl. I think that the point has been made on this. I think Mr. Weinberg explained why he got the variance, and Mr. Pfeffer brought it up.
I agree.
Mr. Jackson, I just would like, just for the record, that application number was SD 1549. I'd just like that in the record, and I thank you.
Okay, Mr. Pfeffer, do you have any other questions?
Mr. Weinberg, none at this time.
Okay, at this time, I would open it up to the, first, do any other board members have any questions? For Mr. Weinberg, Mr. Pfeffer, Mr. Flannery, anybody? Okay, I would open up to the public.
Could I make, Mr. Chairman, could I make one more point, please? That I want to go on the record with?
There's no question from your, well, you should probably give him latitude now, since he can't go ask his attorney to ask the question. I would recommend you let him ask it.
Okay, Mr. Weinberg, go ahead, please.
Again, I just want this to be on the record, and because this has to do a lot with this scenario. Again, I don't know if it's probably not the planning board's jurisdiction, but I think it's important that it goes on the record. Part of the way the applicant was able to assemble the square footage that it needs to make this application is by, and it's referenced in the beginning of the, I think the notice of the notes of the engineer, is that they went ahead and they vacated a portion of Carroll Avenue. Okay, I don't know if you pull up the map, you could see it. It's, you know, they basically vacated Carroll Avenue from the top till where my property is. It's referenced somewhere in one of the engineer's notes. You guys see that somewhere?
Yeah, I saw it. Okay, so what's your point?
My point is, again, I believe, and I have spoken over legally, I believe that I should have been noticed regarding that street vacation. I was not noticed regarding that street vacation. And again, I plan on legally challenging that street vacation. So
Mr.
again,
Jackson, this has nothing to do with the planning board. Vacating of a paper street is not the jurisdiction of this board, and it goes to the township committee.
Okay,
I agree
he
with
just
that,
want to
but
put on the
I'm bringing
record.
up the point.
And I put my objection, on the record.
Okay, no problem. Okay, please proceed.
But I just want to finish. And again, being that potentially this is going to be challenged, again, the proposed square footage for this lot that they need to get all this that they're even asking for includes. And so in theory, if that street vacation should ever get turned over and, you know, reversed, you know, you have a situation where.
Right, so
I'm just
Mr.
putting it
Weinberg.
on the record, that's all.
Okay, no problem. Mr. Weinberg, if that vacation becomes null and void, then I think this whole application becomes null and void because they don't have that much.
Mr. Chairman, I disagree and I object. That has nothing to do with, that street vacation, from my understanding, has already been done and is well past the 45-day appeal period. So to now indicate that now that he filed some lawsuit, allegedly he's going to file something, maybe not. Either way, it's not the jurisdiction of this board.
I agree.
That is a vacated street and it's completed.
Okay, and right now your applicant has a deed to it. You have the full rights to that belongs to you right now.
This has been reviewed by the Lakewood Township, by your professionals.
Okay, so let's go. Okay, so thank you, Mr. Weinberg.
You're welcome.
Okay, I would open it up to the public right now. Is there anybody from the public who would like to be heard in this application?
I would like to be heard.
What's your name?
Elliot Zacks.
1 second, okay, hi. How are you?
I know, Chairman, I just want to read off, I do have an emailed comment from Mr. Hirsch. If he's going to speak as well, I will just note that we will take his spoken testimony and not read the letter as well.
Okay, Mr. Zacks, you have to be affirmed then.
Sure.
Mrs. Jackson?
You swear affirm testimony to give before the board with the whole truth and nothing but.
Yes, Elliot Zacks, 260 Spruce Street. I live right across the subject property. Been living on the street for many years. Actually, I think I bought my property before Mr. Weinberg. I own actually 2 lots on the block. Just to give some color to this application, our street has been under attack by multiple developers over the past 10, 15 years. All the neighbors have got together. We've put together a legal fund and we've been fighting the developers because they wanted to downzone this by the master plan committee and also try to get variances. They've gone in front of the zoning board for multiple times to try to make this into an R15, an R10, R12, and so on. We, as the neighbors, I speak for myself, but also for more our neighbors, we are for this application. You'd be surprised saying, like in Lakewood, New Jersey, why are we willing to go for more housing? The answer is very simple. On this block, there's totally, everybody has at least 100 by 300. That's the nature of the block itself. Some people have merged lots to make them a little larger, but ultimately the minimum lot size across this whole block is 100 by 300. We've told all the developers over the years that you come with 100 by 300, we'll gladly come forward, we'll gladly push for it to be approved. What we don't want is to change the character of our neighborhood itself. We went along, again, we fought this multiple times. Mr. Weinberg himself, when he bought his property and he had his zoning merger, we went along and we came out and he said, hey, I'm in a hardship. At that point, his lot was 100 by 200, his lot was 100 by 300. He said he had a hardship. We came out to help him out in terms of subdividing it. But we told him then, and like we're going to tell them in the future, we will not agree to any sort of subdivision less than 30,000 square feet, because in essence, it changes the neighborhood. And once somebody does that, then all the developers come in and they will all want to go along and to downzone and downgrade the neighborhood. And that's what's been going on for the past 12 years. I would say to Mr. Weinberg, he came and he asked me multiple times, could he take his lot and subdivide into 3 lots? And I told him 100 by 300, happy to have him go along. He doesn't live on the block. We all live on the block. We are 100% for this application because it fits into the scheme, as Mr. Pfeffer said, of what the neighborhood is. And I have one further point out there. The objector's engineer that went along and said that, hey, it's about the lot size. This application, he's 100% right. It's all about the lot size. The lot size is on Spruce Street in the R40 zone. None of them are R40s. They're all 100 by 300 lots. That's 30,000 square feet. So this application exactly fits into what everybody else has on this block, and therefore I am for this application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zex. Okay, next. Anybody else in the public would like to be heard?
Can I speak on behalf?
What's your name?
Bobby Hirsch, 501 Spruce Street.
Okay, you have to be affirmed. Mr. Jackson, could you affirm Mr. Hirsch?
First, do you swear affirm testimony to give before this board with the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, please proceed, Mr. Hirsch.
As Ali said, I submitted a letter, but I'll repeat some of what I wrote in the letter and add to that. I've known the applicants over here for close to a year and probably more than a year. And the applicants, in stark contrast to everybody else that has tried to develop on our street in the past, like Mr. Zaks has said, and they've all come for downzoning. The applicants have gone completely out of the way. They've bent over backwards to conform with what the block wants, with what we need. We have a unofficial association on the block, like Mr. Zaks mentioned. It's a legal fund. We maintain our block. They're completely joining the block. They've done everything they can to work with us, to do everything that we look for to maintain the character of our neighborhood. I know they've worked with Pine River Village, which is directly back to back with them. They've met with everybody, and to the best of my knowledge, they've met on multiple occasions with the objector to try to work with him, and they were ultimately unsuccessful, despite having offered concessions of some sort, and I think they'll speak to that. But my point is that as Elliot said, we've been fighting off downzoning for very long, and we've always made it very, very clear that anybody that comes with 30,000 square feet lots, we'll welcome them with open arms, and that's what we're doing. It will be a benefit to the neighborhood. I know the professional spoke about possible detriments. There isn't a single detriment to the neighborhood. This will be a 100% benefit to the neighborhood. There are lots that are completely conforming with the neighborhood. It will beautify the neighborhood, and it will only add to the character of the neighborhood. And I also just wanted to add to one other thing that Mr. Zaks had mentioned, which is that we've all been living on this block for a long time. We are residents, and Mr. Weinberg is an investor. And the difference between us as residents and him as an investor is obvious. We've been subject to, and I use that word specifically, subject to many conversations where he has asked us and cajoled us and tried to convince us to let him subdivide his 2 lots into 3. So for him to come here and say that this application doesn't meet the requirements is disingenuous at the best. And I would hope that the board sees that for what it is and grants this application. And I look forward to greeting these neighbors on the block in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else from the public who would like to be heard on this application?
Yes, Mr. Zaks.
Okay.
Different Mr. Zaks. It's Elliot's
Do
brother.
you swear affirm testimony you'll give before this board with the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Okay, please proceed.
I'm sorry, didn't and I apologize if I'm incorrect, but didn't Mr. Zaks earlier testify?
The brother.
That's a different person.
Okay.
This is Abraham Zaks, 540 Spruce Street, Lake, New Jersey, 08701. I have been living on the block since 2005. In fact, my brother Mendel bought his house in 2004 and actually sold the house to Mr. Weinberg's parents, who actually own a vacant lot next to themselves and have no interest whatsoever in splitting it. And the reason is because they love the beauty of the block. Pretty much, there's not much that I could add to what Mr. Hirsch said or my dear brother Elliot said, which is that we have a beautiful block. We have been saying for close to 15 years that anyone who's willing to build a single house on a 300 by 100 lot is very, very welcome. If you're an investor and your idea of making money is making other people's lives miserable, then you're not for us. That pretty much summarizes Mr. Weinberg. So we're very pro this.
You know, Mr. Chairman, this isn't supposed to be a character assassination on the guy who's objecting.
I'm not sure.
It's inappropriate. Talk about the merits of the application, whether Mr. Weinberg.
He just said he's pro the application. Okay, Mr. Zaks, is that it?
Pretty much that sums it up.
Okay.
I've been living 15 years.
Okay.
I invested a lot of money in this block.
And you would like to see this, and you would like to see this application?
100%.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a question. To pose to both Mr. And my question is, were you referred to houses being built on 30,000 square foot lots? Were any of those houses built on a 30,000 square foot lot that was the subject matter of a new subdivision?
Again, you're asking in the history of the block, has any house been built on a lot that was original 40,000 and that was reduced to 30,000? Is that what you're asking?
Well, no, yeah, there any of the houses you referred to being built on 30,000 square foot lots, were they pre-existing 30,000 square foot lots, or were they newly created?
Absolutely not. No one's denying the fact that the history of the block is that it's an R40, and every single lot on the block is an in reality, is an R30. Which,
It was an existing lot, correct?
Sorry?
It was an existing lot.
No, absolutely not. Mr. Hirsch, for example, across the street from me,
Existing R30 he's asking, not R40.
Needed his R40 to be a variance to get down to R30.
Yeah, but not subdivided. You're asking if it's subdivided.
Okay, one at a time.
Absolutely, that's exactly what happened. And Mr. Hirsch, I'm sure it's on
Mr.
the call.
Gazarovski,
He could give you
clarify
the
your
info.
question.
Hey, Mr. Weinberg, please wait.
Did he understand my question? My question.
No, I'm a rule first. You have to explain to what you asked. Your question is, if it was originally R40 and it went down to R30, is that what you're trying to say?
No.
You've testified that there are a number of houses that are built on lots that are 30,000 square feet, correct?
Every single house that
I
has
accept that.
been, sir.
Okay, and I'm assuming.
Sir.
Am I correct?
Sir. You asked a question, I'm going to answer it. Every single house on the block is on a minimum of a 30,000 square foot lot. Now there are lots that are bigger. For example, my brother's house he owns more than 30,000 square feet. But for example, let's say myself, it's about like 32,000 square feet. Or Mr. Hirsch is the same way. Or Mr. Shapiro is the same way. And pretty much the majority of the houses that were actually built on this block. On this block, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but that's not the question.
All on 100 by 300 or 3,000, which is 30,000 square feet.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay.
The Gazarovski's face is just going with a little twirly.
Okay, I think you answered this question. Is there anybody? Thank you, Mr. Zaks. Is there anybody else? Is there anybody else in the public would like to be heard on this application?
Martin Shapiro.
Okay. Mr. Shapiro, you have to be affirmed.
During testimony, I'll give before this board with the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Laser Pro, what's to mess you up? I was right on every.
Yes, sir.
Ali, please mute anybody else in the public who's speaking. Mr. Shapiro is speaking right now. I gave him the right to speak. Mr. Shapiro?
Hey, how are you?
Okay, please proceed.
Okay, so I agree with my neighbors and Elliot.
Were you affirmed then?
Yeah.
Okay, so just make your comment fast because we have to wrap it up tonight.
Sure.
What's your comment?
So, I told you, my comment is that I agree with all my neighbors that we all have 30,000 square feet homes. I understand his point that they didn't start off bigger and we're making them smaller, but we all feel that this is great for the neighborhood to have this size lots because that's what we all have. We just don't want smaller. That's what we've been fighting for all these years.
So you're okay. So you're pro. You want this application to go through.
This is the first time that I've been on this board for, fighting for years not to have this, but I feel like these guys are coming like normal people and trying to ask what we all have. The guy that's fighting on this time, if we all read between the lines, with all due respect to him, he doesn't live here, and at the end of the day, he's trying to get it to be even lower than this.
Okay,
he's not trying
thank
to
you.
keep it at zone that he has. He's trying to get it even lower than that. So
okay,
this whole thing, in my opinion, is a game to try to get us to break to get lower. So he needs to understand that we're not going to break, and we're going to keep fighting it, and we want this to go through. So
okay, thank you.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the public would like to be heard on this application?
Yes.
What's your name?
Can I, Mr.
What?
Becker? Mark
What?
Becker.
Mark Becker. How are you? You have to be affirmed.
Fine. I don't have. Okay.
Mr. Becker, do you swear from testimony to give before this board with the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, they do.
Where do you live, sir? What's your address?
I live in the Vine Street area.
What's your address?
I don't think I have to give it. I don't want to give it.
I think you have to give it because we have to know that you have standing, and the applicant's entitled to know the address of the people who are testifying. It's a requirement.
I'm not going to opine pro, or I'm not going to object to this application. I just want to correct for the record and assertion that.
The problem is if someone doesn't give their address, we don't know that they have standing. You gotta say who you are and where you live.
Okay, I live in Lakewood, New Jersey.
Mr. Herzl, he's being flippant.
Which area?
The Vine Street area. If you don't want to accept me, then I'll hang up and I'll say I wasn't accepted.
Okay.
I'm not opining pro, or I'm not objecting to the application. I want to speak about something Mr. Pfeffer said only. I have no opinion on the application.
Then there's nothing to do with this case.
Okay.
He has no opinion on the application.
Okay.
To the next.
Anybody else in the public would like to be heard?
Yes.
What's your name?
Mark. Aaron Kirschenbaum, Mr. Kirschenbaum. Oh, Mark, you go. Mark, you go. No, Mark, go.
Mark Lowinger,
Mark, take
33
it.
Treeside Lane, Lakewood, New Jersey, 08701.
Thank you, sir. Do you swear for testimony to give before this board with the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, please proceed. And make it
Just
short,
wanna-
please.
Yeah, very short. I understand it's late. I want to thank the board for the time here. This is an application that's been worked on for many, many, many months. We are people who live in the general neighborhood that are looking to be end users here. This is not a development. We went through every possible step to make sure everybody was happy, as was mentioned previously, including Pine River Village from behind, including Mr. Weinberg, who we met with multiple times, except each time he was being a little bit more unreasonable. We'll talk about that in a second. But the entire block.
Let's not be negative. Just get to the point.
Okay, great. So all the neighbors, and as the planning board knows, this is a block that's been tried to be redeveloped multiple times. We sat with them. They had concerns. Some of those concerns were to our detriment, but we agreed to it because we want peace. We want everyone to be happy. We did that, and I believe we're the first group that's done everything possible to make sure everybody's happy. It is unreasonable that an investor who everybody knows what he's up to should stop an application where people want to end up living. That's number one. Number two, I just want to say for the record, because we're talking about records, there was a point in time where Mr. Weinberg had asked to be paid off in order to allow this to go through, and it's for the record. End of
Okay, Thank you. Anybody else who would like to be heard? See no one, I'll close it to the public.
I think Aaron Kirschenbaum wanted to speak. I just unmuted him.
Okay, Mr.
Mark
Kirschman.
spoke for me. Hi, thank you. Mark spoke for me already, so I'm good.
Okay, thank you. I will close it to the public right now.
Mr. Chairman, I know we've had this issue before. Are there any other public comments from people that spoke out? I know I'm looking online, there are 8 comments. I know 2 of them from Ron, I know 1 was from Avi. I just don't want to miss.
I have 2 that I don't think we saw the name yet, and I can read them quickly if you'd like.
Yeah, I'd just rather have the record clear, Mr. Chairman, and not have any issues
Agree.
that we didn't miss.
This is Miriam Deutsch. She says Pine River Village supports the application. The applicant's been very transparent. Everything that they wanted has been listened to.
Okay,
The
next.
other one is Hindi Sachs. She's also at Pine River Village. She talked about leaving some trees with them. They asked to have that in writing, but they have not received that letter yet. So she'd like time to discuss that. Ralph Zucker staff told me nothing will be there because it belongs to the township. The reality at this time is that the township has already sold the street to Ralph Zucker, so she would never have bought a house here. She's not against land being subdivided and some homes being built, but I very badly need a reasonable buffer. She is located she didn't give her address, so her yard is back to back with the street lot closest to Goldcrest.
Okay.
Is it Aaron? Did I mention something here?
Okay. You have to be affirmed. Mr. Jackson?
Sir, do you swear affirm testimony to give before the court with the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, agreed.
Please proceed.
Yeah, I just want to mention, we met with the whole Pine River Village and everyone, and they all agreed. We signed something together, an agreement with the rabbi, and we are in agreement to put trees up. And
Well,
I think that was
this is hearsay. When you have an agreement, just testify what your own opinion.
Are you on the board? Are you part of this application?
Yes, I'm one of the applicants.
So you're agreeing to give all the buffer that this Mrs. X wanted? She's asking for buffers over there? Are you testifying that you're going to give the trees whatever she wanted?
I will. We discussed it with them. I think we came to agreement with them that we're going to do
Mr.
this.
Chairman, should the board act favorably in this application, the applicant
will satisfy them.
Will satisfy with additional buffering during resolution compliance.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kirschenbaum. Okay, I'm closing it to the public right now. And any final comments? Mr. Jackson, how does it work right now?
What do you, generally, the opposition, if he wants to close, Mr. Gazarovski would close first, and then Mr. Pfeffer can close after that.
Okay, Mr. Gazarovski.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I obviously have made my objections known throughout this hearing. The fact of the matter is that your professional has provided a letter which basically states that this is not a conforming situation, and this is further amplified by the comments of Mr. Gemma saying this is a self-created hardship. I realize that there is a great deal of emotion in this application. I've listened to the comments, Mr. Weinberg. This is not a personality contest. This is a contest based upon what the municipal land use law is, based upon what your master plan says, and really based upon the fact that when we're referring to these lots that houses have been built upon, they are pre-existing non-conforming lots, and relief was sought from them. That's what happened. This is a newly created, self-created hardship, and obviously the game plan here is at some point in time to come in to further subdivide Lot 5 to avoid having to go before the zoning board with this application. So the applicant is really being disingenuous with you. He wants to be here, not where he should be, which is before the zoning board of adjustment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pfeffer.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman. We've heard a lot of testimony, and I want to point out, just to sum up, that all the testimony that you've heard, both from the applicant and from all the surrounding neighbors who reside in the surrounding neighborhood, they're all overwhelmingly in favor of this application. The only objection you've heard is from someone who does not reside in this neighborhood. Same person who has sought more intense variances on the neighboring property, and everything we are seeking is more than reasonable. There are very few 40,000 square foot compliant lots in this area. 30 plus thousand square foot lots is the norm, and that is all we are seeking. I would respectfully request that the board have favor as far as everything that we've heard, and they grant this request.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I'd ask the board if someone would like to make a motion.
Mr. Chairman, this is Justin. I'll make a motion to approve the application, subject to, as Mr. Pfeffer indicated, that I'm working with, I think it was Mrs. Weiss, to give as much buffering as possible, in terms of trees, whatever else she might need. Mrs. Zaks, I'm sorry.
Okay, do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second.
Okay.
Sure.
Mr. Lennon,
You want that buffer, a dimension. There's Jakey.
Okay, Jackie, I'm sorry. Okay, we have a motion, second, roll call, please.
Mr. Garfield. Mr. Garfield.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Sable. Are you here, Mr. Sable? Does anybody see his name? There he is. Mr. Sable, are you there? He won't, for some reason, it won't let me unmute him. I'm gonna
John,
skip
can you
him.
hear him?
Mr. Sable, could you unmute yourself? Mr. Sable?
What?
Okay, Ali, please continue and we'll get back to him.
Mr. Flansbaum.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Herzl.
Yes.
Mr. Bernard had stepped down. Mr. Isaacson.
Yes.
Mr. Meyer.
Yes.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so Ali, without I just want to confirm for the record, without Time Sable, we have 5 members who voted, right?
Yes, we do.
Hold on a
Okay, so
second.
motion approved.
Mr. Sable is calling me. You can hear everything, Mr. Sable? You can't get through. Mr. First of all, when I put Mr. Sable, who's on the phone, on here, can you hear him? Say something.
Not really.
You can't pick that up. Mr. Sable's telling me he votes in the affirmative. I mean, it's kind of irregular, but I don't think it matters because you have to vote. But the record, Mr. Sable called me on his cell. He says he can hear everything, and he says he votes in the affirmative.
Okay, Mr. Jackson, that's why I said, just in case it gets appealed, I want to make sure we have 5 members who voted in the affirmative right now. And we did have 5 members. Okay, thank you. Ali, we have just, it's very late. Just before we go further, I know we have one, the number 4.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, it's Lady Edison. I need to step away for the evening.
Okay, okay, good night. Ali, the number 4, when are we moving it up to?
July 6th is next week and is very full. July 20th, we are trying to do as our first in-person meeting, but I will not be there to help you with that. So I don't know if you want to put that on the 20th or put it for August 3rd, which doesn't have anything else on it yet.
I'm unavailable on the July date.
Okay, so we'll leave it for August. Who's that? Mr. Kashuba?
It's Mr. Kashuba.
Okay, so make it the first meeting in August.
Okay.
So that's August 3rd?
Correct.
Mr. Herzl?
Yes.
Chairman?
Yes.
Does that mean that when you say the application's approved, that means as is, they don't have to do anything with my front setback, they can leave it as is, nothing, that's it, they just leave it, I get a front setback there, and you don't even discuss that whole thing.
It was approved as the way it was presented.
Way as presented and whatever the applicant agreed to.
So that means I get, okay, just wanted to clarify that. Okay.
Okay. Thank
All
you. And, Ali, I close it to the public already.
Yes.
I don't know what people are talking. Okay, so number 4 is going to August, which day in August?
August 3rd.
Okay.
August the 3rd? August the 3rd?
Yeah.
Yes, we will make the legal announcement if given the opportunity.
Yes,
Sorry, is Ron also on number 4? Just so I know for the record.
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I thank you for your attention and patience this evening. Obviously, I'm disappointed in the vote, but
Ron, we still need to make the announcement to carry the items left on our agenda. Can you please hold tight?
Yeah, so number 4.
That August 4th, that's not going to be virtual, right?
August
No, it's not.
3rd, it will be in person. Oh, so it's gonna need new notice anyway.
I will renotice for the August 3rd, Benjamin Bar.
Okay, for the record, we would like to go in person by the July 20th meeting. Okay, whoever's listening to it, if we have to renotice, please renotice because we're going in person.
what is the new date?
We do have a correspondence item, SP 2306 as well, that had provided notice. That needs to provide new notice. Do you want to put that on the 20th or on August 3rd?
Do we have 5 members? It's a removal of offense. I don't know if you want to take 5 minutes. It's up to you. I'm here either way.
He's no longer on. I don't know if that matters. He's having trouble with his phone and he hung up.
Mr. Sable's not here and Mr. Isaacson's not here.
Okay.
And it's 9:20 already. Okay, when can, one at a time. Ali, when can we hear the correspondence? Also the 20th?
July 20th or August 3rd?
Is there any chance of moving next week? It's literally a 5-minute removal of offense.
We have another correspondence item on that night already and a lot of contentious application. It's up to the chairman.
I can put you on, but I don't think you'll get hurt.
If you could just put it on, if we get something falls off, then we make some room and we're good.
Okay.
Okay, approval of minutes.
Wait, so John, can you make
We
the
have a
announcement for correspondence? Because I already noticed on that one.
What's the date that's going to be?
July 6th.
And
I'm sorry.
Still virtual on July 6th. I'm having trouble following that.
Yes, July
Yes.
6th, still virtual.
So what number is that?
Correspondence.
Correspondence. Members of the public be advised, correspondence number SP 2006, 1650 Massachusetts Avenue will be heard on July 6th, 2021, 6 o'clock in this virtual format.
Thank you.
Thank you. Approval of minutes. Anybody still there?
I'm here.
Do we still have a quorum?
We
No,
need that to pay.
I guess we can't do minutes and bills. We
Yeah,
don't
you
have a
can't do
quorum.
minutes if there's no quorum.
When Jakey's
That's fine.
on, let's.
We'll leave it for next week.
You're not gonna get paid, Ali.
To do it.
No?
We're good. It's just a week.
Okay. Everybody have a good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.